Astonishing Legends would like to thank Mint Mobile, Purple, Stamps.com, Current, Wondrium, Simply Safe, our contributors at Patreon.com, and you, our listeners, for making tonight's show possible.
In our last episode, we introduced you to one of the most intriguing books we've ever read, The Vertical Plane by Ken Webster. A story that started out sounding like a ghost story, but then morphed into something much more complex and akin to science fiction. When we left off, the author and his friends were trying to make sense of a series of messages that mysteriously appeared on various computers borrowed from the local school that Ken taught at. Messages that seemed to be from the past. Only it was much more complicated than that because the gentleman sending the messages felt as though he was very much alive, and that Ken and his compatriots were spirits that he must take caution in speaking with. How could parties at both ends of the conversation be alive when separated in time by 400 years? As the story evolved and Ken went to work trying to figure out what was going on, they learned that their friend from the past was not the only person on the line. There was another party, someone referring to themselves as 2109. Is that their name? Is it the year they are calling from? Things just continue to get more and more confusing as the communications unravel. Suddenly, there are warnings that mistakes are being made, and there are implications that perhaps multiple timelines have been sucked into this strange communication portal. They were warned that if some of the characters involved in this legend should cross paths, well, the outcome could be disastrous. The complexity of this tale is rivaled only by its bizarreness. What is going on here? And if it's a true astonishing legend, then what are the implications?
Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Forrest Burgess.
Tomas is a person living in the 16th century, but unknown to him, he is not quite what he seems to be. The being known as 2109 in a message to Ken and his friends sent on the BBC Microcomputer.
Join us and our special guest Richard Hatem tonight for an October supersized final part of our series on the book, The Vertical Plane.
And we're back.
Wait, who is that?
It's either my really crummy Robin Williams impression or Werner Klemperer, who played Colonel Klink.
Yeah, it sounded more like him, I think. Well,
they're very interchangeable, but yeah, I'm just going to keep practicing. It's terrible, but you got to work on these things.
Yes.
So that's going to be my next and we're backs for the next probably 25 episodes.
That's good. I like it. Well, we are back. A couple of quick notes tonight, folks, before we dive back into the story here. Firstly, we were recently on Rob Christofferson's show, Our Strange Skies, where we had a long-ranging and candid discussion with him about some of the strange events in his life. He released that a few weeks ago, so find and subscribe to Our Strange Skies wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun and really interesting. And one last bit of truly astonishing news before we dive into the setup for the show tonight. We would like to congratulate our wonderful editor, Sarah Voorhees Wendell, and her husband, Paul, on the arrival of their astonishing second child, Lena Catherine Wendell. She was born on September 22nd of 2021 at 12:37 p.m. in an ambulance on the side of the freeway, minutes from Sarah and Paul's house. The family is now resting comfortably at home, where Lena will meet her older brother, sweet little Vaughn.
There are some truly amazing details to the legend of Lena's birth, not the least of which is that Sarah was out on a walk trying to encourage Lena to start thinking about making her appearance when a dog named Beckett dragged his owner over to her from a good distance away because he could tell something was up. The owner said that Beckett was empathic that day. Apparently so. We'll miss Sarah these next few months, but we'd like to welcome our pinch-hitting editor on board, Brandon Schexnader, whom we met at Podcast Movement in Nashville just a month or two ago. He's already edited a few episodes and took to it quickly, so thank you, Brandon. Sarah, rest easy, and we'll see you back soon.
Well, Sarah, congratulations again from the rest of the astonishing team, and a hearty welcome to Lena Catherine. Okay, it's time to get back to part 2 of our series on the vertical plane. There's a lot to talk about tonight, but before we cue up the rest of our discussion with Rich Hatem, we wanted to address some of the comments that came into our inboxes and various social media platforms after we posted part 1.
Yeah, folks, and this is what's really interesting. We actually got a little bit ahead with this series, and we were able to produce it ahead of time, which we almost never get to do. And as such, it's nearly entirely foreign to us to have something in the can before we get
Right.
reactions from you. Normally, it's like we put it out, we're hand to mouth. It's like, okay, we got that one done. Now we got to research the next one, which is going to be happening the next 2 weeks, by the way. But usually we're not ahead. And so when we got ahead and people had feedback, and we are like, oh, wait, we already recorded part 2, but these people are all making some really good points here. So we wanted to take a few minutes to address some of this stuff that came in.
Here's the strange thing about this topic. The book, the story, the incidents, the elements, the factual things around it, and the discussions, and I mean the strange blog entries and the readers' comments for all this, it's all just as strange as the story itself. It's kind of hard to explain.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's generated as much discussion as any one of our other topics. We certainly haven't seen this in a while, where people they get sucked into this thing, this rabbit hole, and they want to talk about it. They also want to make a few corrections to us because we did misspeak. We were kind of shooting from the hip when we talked to Rich. Yeah, not terrible, but in light of putting out as much correct factual information as we can, there's just a few things that we're going to go over. But also, there are interesting points in that they are philosophical or analytical to the topic at hand, and some of the ways you can think about that analytically.
Yeah, and the other thing is when you're having an off-the-cuff conversation like the one we had with Rich, you just rolling with it, and you're kind of rolling through things, and sometimes when you're doing that, the fact-checking slips by the wayside a little bit. But we were still mostly on point, but there's a few things we should definitely address.
Yes, absolutely. And like with movie magic, we just recorded like 4.5 hours of conversation and chopped it in the middle. So you know what? It's like how they shoot or tape a episode of Jeopardy, the fabulous quiz show. They actually shoot 2 back to back.
Yes.
Because they're already set up. It's a half-hour show. Let's just do 2 at a time. So a lot of Hollywood is done that way, where they get 2 in the can because it's too expensive to just do the half hour and everybody strike and come back tomorrow. So they try and double up their production efforts, which is kind of what we did. And speaking to your point, Scott, so normally when we start the research process on a topic, the first thing I do, or one of the first things I do, I find out where it is on the map. And that's what I did this time, and compared that to Ken Webster's description in the book. But as you got to talking, and again, we're not very familiar with the area.
Right.
So I may have misspoken a little bit about where it is, and I wanted to clear that up because this mystery is known as the mystery of the Dodleston Messages. And the place, as we'll see, has a lot to do, perhaps, with the nature of the phenomenon. We've had some listeners write into us saying that whole area has a lot of limestone. The castles around there and the cathedrals were built out of it. It's a big argument for the stone tape theory. So that is prominent in about where it's located. So I think Rich said it was just outside London, which is not correct, but we were discussing other places before that. So I
no, and Rich, by the way, he doesn't have all the like gatekeeping we have about like, wait, did we say this right? He's just like blah 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 blah.
Yeah, no, he's rolling on the bigger concepts. He's not as hung up in the sticky wickets of facts.
It's
because
10 miles southwest of yes. Yeah.
He's not going to get the email. So anyway, he knows the bigger concepts. But I want to be correct about this because, again, location has so much to do with, I guess, the nature of the phenomenon in a way. We've had listeners write to tell us that that whole area is chock full of limestone, and a lot of the cathedrals are built out of that. The walled city of Chester is made out of limestone. Some of the castles there. It's a big argument for the stone tape theory, or at least facilitating that. So to back up here, this story takes place in the village of Dodleston, 4 miles southwest of the Unitary Authority of Cheshire West and Chester, in the ceremonial county of Cheshire, England. Now, Dodleston is only about a mile from the border of England and Wales and about 2.5 miles from the River Dee on the Welsh side. So I believe when I misspoke, I said it's near central Wales, when actually Dodleston is close to northeastern Wales. So essentially, Dodleston is in central to northwest England, about 18.5 miles due south of Liverpool, the home of the fabulous mop top for the Beatles.
The Mop Top 4, that's not a nickname I've heard them called by. But
No, but they were Mop Top. They were known as the Fab Four.
Fab 4 I'll go with.
The
But
Fab Four
Mop
with
Top
their
4,
mop top
I haven't heard that one
haircuts.
before,
Yeah,
but okay.
not seen in media up to that time a lot.
Yes.
They started a craze, but yes, so people may have heard of Liverpool. I tried to give them a little bit of a map point, a dart in the map to wrap their heads around.
Yes.
So again, that is north to northeastern Wales, and Chester, the closest city to the northeast, is designated a walled cathedral city. So I also think I said Chester was a town. But keep in mind, where I'm from, we're a lot looser with our common folk considerations of what constitutes a town. Like we might say, we're going into town for this or that, but technically we're going into the city. So what I've learned here is that the official demographics and geographical definitions between a town and a city differ depending on the country you're talking about. So this is from worldatlas.com, and they say different countries in the world have different demographics and geographical definitions for cities. In Sweden and Denmark, a settlement of more than 200 people forms a town, whereas Australia and Canada have set a minimum of 1,000 people to make a town. And this figure varies in France and Israel, who have set a minimum of 2,000 people to make a city. In the US and Mexico, a city should have at least 2,500 people, compared to Japan, where cities must have at least 30,000 people. So
well, you're
big
working with that
difference there.
tiny island, so
Well, that's a
city.
So that's another thing about the United Kingdom here. City status in the UK is granted by the monarch of the UK. This is also from the wiki entry here, to a select group of communities. So as of 2014, there were only 69 cities in the UK, 51 in England and 6 in Wales, and 7 in Scotland, 5 in Northern Ireland. Here's what's funny. We had several comments because I called Chester a town. It's like, no, it's a city. It's a walled city. So they're very proud about that city designation. But I did get Dodleston right, and that's a village. It's a much smaller unit.
So this is kind of like when we covered the Welsh Berwyn Mountain incident, and I was confused about the 991 calls as opposed to or 999 calls. Yeah, I'm still confused, as you can see. Yeah, that I thought that 999 people had called in when I didn't realize it was the equivalent of 911 here in the States. So you know what, folks?
Yes.
We don't live over there, but we're trying. We're trying to bring you the accurate information here. So.
I know. No, people were very nice. They were just pointing out.
Yeah, every time there's an
their
emergency in the
differences.
United States, 911 people call in. So
Yeah. Which seems not. Why not just stop just below 1,000?
Yeah, right,
At
yeah.
999.
999?
Actually, and I'll say this: the 999, you're just on the one key.
Yeah, it's easier to dial. Boop, boop, boop.
So I get that. Some things make sense to me. Other things outside of the U.S., not as much. But getting back to the status of a city in England, Wiki goes on to say, the status does not apply automatically on any particular criteria, because in England and Wales, it was traditionally given to towns with diocesan cathedrals. So here we go again. Chester is a walled cathedral city. So this is interesting because this guy keeps coming up. Getting back to the wiki entry on the definition, this association, it says, between having a cathedral and being called a city was established in the early 1540s when King Henry VIII founded dioceses, each having a cathedral in the See city. That's S-E-E. So the religious body and the people in it, in 6 English towns, and he granted them city status by issuing letters patent. So this is what's interesting, and I point this out because Lukas, as you remember, he says his king is King Henry VIII, his queen is Catherine Parr.
Right.
He's around in this time here, the 1540s, when this is happening. So that's interesting. There's a lot of weird historical connections with this story. Or, if a prank, somebody who really knows their history. So then we're on to the next correction here. And this is about the BBC Microcomputer, which is also fascinating because I think we should know a little bit more about this machine and its history to understand the device, the means of communication that these messages from the past are coming through.
Is this where you're going to hang my cheese out in the wind when I said it has nothing to do with
I
the
was
BBC?
going to include us both.
No, it's mine. It's my cheese. Put my cheese in the wind. I'll own it. I'm going to, as my wife says in Hollywood, you made that mistake. You got to wear it. So I'm going to wear the BBC mistake. So yeah, go ahead.
I went with it at the time because it sounded
you
like
didn't
one of
know
those
either.
things where, no, well, I didn't know for certain, but as we were rolling in conversation, and this is to your point earlier, as we're talking, it's like, no, I can imagine the opposite where I said like, oh yes, the computer, And the British Broadcasting Corporation, well, one was developed to further education, and I would be totally wrong.
Yeah.
We come back and the actual fact is, no,
Sometimes
you
we
idiot,
make
they
leaps.
had nothing to do.
Yeah, we make some leaps. And here's the thing. I like to also be like, no, this sounds just like that thing, but it's actually completely unrelated. I'm going into my own sort of obsessive, like, just because it's this doesn't mean it's that. And that's what I did in this case. And I was wrong. I was wrong. But I was not entirely wrong.
Right.
Because the BBC didn't make this computer. Their name was associated with it, right?
We're going to talk about that.
They endorsed this process, but it's not like the BBC built a factory that made computers. That's my point.
No, but listen to the story because
Okay.
it is interesting and not really something that you could do in the US, I believe.
Okay.
Actually, they got criticized for doing this, the BBC did. So here's basically the rundown of the story. So yes, we've had a number of emails about the BBC Microcomputer, and it does have a connection to the British Broadcasting Corporation, or BBC. So the computer in this story that Ken and his friends were using, the BBC Micro for short, was designed and built by Acorn Computers and sold for the BBC's Computer Literacy Project in the early 1980s. This computer learning initiative was partly inspired by an ITV documentary series called The Mighty Micro, which heralded the coming computer revolution and how it would change everything about modern life. So then the BBC put out bids for a computer to be developed that could demonstrate various tasks, which would then be featured on their 1982 series called The Computer Program, which aired on BBC Two. Of course, it's being British, it's Programme. And I did learn the difference is that when it is a show, you have those extra M's and E's that British folks are really fond of, especially in Lucas's time. A lot of extra E's, Y's, a lot of extra letters.
Yes.
English was still pretty new then and being formed. As we talked about, I think on the show, it's that transition between, was it late Middle English into more modern English, and not the emo band. Continuing on, Acorn Computers won this BBC bid with a computer design and model called the Proton, which was the next generation model of their earlier Atom computer. The Acorn development team had only 1 week to get their existing sketches of the successor Proton into a working prototype, and burning the midnight oil, they produced the only bidder computer that matched and mostly exceeded the BBC's specifications. You and I would appreciate that, staying up for all week to meet this deadline.
Yes.
And they did it. They exceeded. They succeeded.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And so the name of this BBC Micro,
We've done that 218 times.
every time it's a burning the midnight oil to deliver, just get it acceptable.
Right.
Let's say that. And hopefully entertaining. Well, the name BBC Micro in this case was later adopted in lieu of Proton, and 9 models in this family were to be produced. Models A, B plus 64, so we're talking about memory size here, B64, B128, Master 128, and Master Compact. And the name BBC Micro generally just refers, though, to the first 6 models. So I hope I didn't misspeak about anything, but we have a lot of computer literate people out in the audience, and they pointed us to the correct information on that. Also people who grew up with these things because they're our age, and that's how they learn to use the computer. When I was in high school, it was a Tandy Radio Shack computer with the cassette tape drive, and that's where we learned BASIC 2, I believe. So now, this computer in our story is now known as the BBC Micro, and this computer and its peripherals were adopted by most schools in the United Kingdom, as well as becoming a popular and functional home computer. And they were really valued for their efficient operating system, their expandability, and durable architecture. So they were pretty solidly built, not some cheap crap. That's why they lasted so long and were so popular. And this favored status by the media, though, UK education and British consumers greatly enriched the success of Acorn, as you can imagine. Suddenly they just blew up overnight from that one bid. So efforts well done.
Yeah, and I want to point out here that that thing's still around today. That became the basis for the ARM architecture that's part of RISC machines and all that. And maybe you're going to get to that.
Yeah.
I won't go into a lot of detail of it, but I do want to point out one of our interactive listeners on Twitter who we communicated with for years and years now, Blake Patterson. His Twitter handle is @BlakeSpot. Look him up because he has an amazing website too called byteseller.com. That's BYTE cellar.com. This is the ultimate, man cave's not the right word. It's all just old computers like this. And he's an expert on this. And he was communicating to me
Wow.
about this last week. We talked about this a little bit on Fireside. He mentioned that folks who are interested in this older computer history should watch a movie called Micromen. This is a BBC docudrama about early 80s British home computers that explains the genesis of the BBC Micro and the school competition that was run to standardize computers in the UK, and Martin Freeman's in it. So he said it's really great. Came out in 2009, and it's called Micromen. We're probably going to have him on a Fireside show or possibly on Patreon in the future because he knows about all this stuff. He had a lot to say about this and about how much we got it wrong, most specifically me. So, Forrest, that's it. Yeah, I'll give it back to you.
Okay, very cool. We are going to talk about that because it's not just him busting your chops.
Yeah.
Listener Keith Gibbs wrote to us not only with a very handy link he would like to share with the audience to a scanned, republished print of the vertical plane posted on archive.org, which we have listed in our website, on the webpage.
Multiple links now to places where you can get it. I was like, oh, you can't find it anywhere. And it is out there. I'm not sure how legit a lot of them are, but there are links of them out there, and you can get to it and download it and read it. So.
Right. So on our webpage there, it's listed in the related books section of the webpage for the series. But he also had some interesting comments about the BBC Micro. So Keith states that a better comparison to the BBC Micro rather than a first-gen Mac would be the Tandy Corporation's TRS-80 sold through their Radio Shack stores.
I'm pretty sure I said that.
What?
Or maybe that's here in part 2. Again,
yeah,
we recorded everything in a 7-hour session and we broke it in half. And I can't remember. I want to say this too. I can't remember everything that's going to come up tonight after this soliloquy we're doing right now.
Right.
There's going to be some stuff coming up here, but I know at some point during our discussion with Rich about this, I mentioned the TRS-80 or the Trash 80. And I think
you did
tonight. Yeah.
The Trash 80. No, you did. But I think as some of the wordplay was in there, especially with Rich and all of us stepping all over each other, in that I think somebody may have said like, well, it was basically a glorified typewriter. It didn't do this and that. It wasn't very functional. It was more, I may have said like it was like an early Mac, this is Keith Gibbs' point. It's like, well, it's probably closest to the Tandy Corporation's TRS-80.
Yeah.
Which did a lot more than we were giving it credit for. That was one of his points. So he says...
No, I loved the TRS-80. I just want to say that.
Okay, we got it. We got it.
No, I loved it. I used to write programs on it. I did love that.
Right.
It's like when I was a kid, I was super into it. I know. You can cut me off.
Well, that's what we had.
I didn't ever want to diss the TRS-80. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. The ghosts of Tandy will grant you respite. We're all fine. No, we had that growing up. We're very fond of what we had growing up. And obviously... UK students were very fond of their BBC Micro, as we learned from all the emails here. So Keith goes on to say, though, it's also possibly comparable more to the Commodore VIC-20 or the Apple II. So in that sense, what it could do, its capability, its architecture, a little closer to that. I know a lot of people don't really care because they can't remember what these machines were like. But if you're our age, you certainly do. Keith also states that they were relatively capable general-purpose machines and a lot more than just an electronic typewriter or word processor. We were also talking about that. Listen, that's what they were mostly using it for, but it did do other things. But for most folks, it was most handy, I think, as a word processor.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what I was using. I mean, I was very young back at the time when I was able to play with these machines. But yeah. It was word processing and really basic stuff. And also, I just confirmed from our automated transcript of what's coming up tonight that I did bring up the TRS-80 numerous times.
Oh, I know you did.
And it's going to start 2 hours and 16 minutes into our discussion with Rich tonight. So I did bring up the TRS-80.
I know you did. Yes. Excellent.
But it wasn't in part 1. Yeah. It's in part 2. So.
Okay.
But I loved that machine. Folks. I thought it was cool. Yes, set your timers. I know. People are dying to clock when I brought it up.
You've absolved yourself. You're fine.
Not really.
We're all okay.
I don't feel absolved. Where's your Owen Wilson? Yeah.
We're gonna get to all that, man. just hang tight, all right? Just don't freak out, man. All right, here we go. This is more about the BBC Micro from Keith. He mentions that Acorn computers, using their architecture developed for the BBC Micro, Acorn that is, developed what was first known as the Acorn RISC machine.
Yes.
Then later known as Advanced RISC Machines, RISC being the acronym for Reduced Instruction Set Computing. As Keith says, this ARM architecture is, quote, the same processor architecture in basically every phone, tablet, and high-end smart device in the world. Full stop.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's quite a legacy and a history there, and connected to some really weird communications throughout timelines and time periods, perhaps. But in any case, do you remember in your Tandy, whatever you're doing with BASIC 2, these early terms and ideas were being bandied about, and they would later become what we all take for granted now, and that they had to develop at some point, and that's what we're talking about here. And just the amount, I'm going to make a point here about how people think about computing now compared to what it was like in 1984 and 85 when Ken and his friends were operating, because it's a different way of looking at it and a different viewpoint on these types of communications. In that nowadays, the genie's so out of the bottle with all this stuff, it'd be too hard to really pinpoint where this stuff is coming from. Everybody gets hacked all the time. We just expect it, or there's ransomware, or somebody's messing with your junk. And we don't know, we can't track them down, they're in some foreign country. It's all very mysterious. It may as well been from the future or from the 16th century. We don't know. But back then, things were a little simpler. It's like working on a 1946 Ford.
Yeah.
You open the hood, lots of room, you can see where everything is. You don't have to spend 2 hours taking everything out to get to something. That's my point here. It's a different way of looking at it. And it's also, you may not think this is important, but it's a way of looking at the veracity of this story and how true could this be back then. But getting back to the origins of some of this technology and Clwyd Technics, which is the Welsh name for this county, the technology, the cottage industry technology that was coming out, especially for 8-bit products here. Listener Dave Bates says he was also one of the folks that found a digitally scanned copy at archive.org. So a few people found that and graciously shared that with us.
Yes, and I shouldn't be delegitimizing the copies because I'm sure that some of them are legitimate and some aren't. So, and I don't know which ones are and aren't, but
Right. So
and I don't think anyone cares right now. It seems like it's just out there. If you look really hard, you can find it.
You can find it. I think some copies have been scanned and with optical character recognition, because the messages we've gotten about it sent to us say that some of the words are misspelled or something seem off, but you'll generally get most of the text well done. So they're worth checking out. This one that Dave had sent us is really clean looking. And also there are other reprints available. That's another part of the mystery of this book, is the book itself.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that in a second here. In any case, Dave Bates is one of the folks who found the digitally scanned copy, and he writes, Clwyd Technics, the computer company that helped develop the Edward program, he says that in the UK, Clwyd would not be considered particularly local, as 30 miles is a fair distance. Dave states the old adage, 100 years is old in America, 100 miles is far in the UK. So we look at a map, it's like, yeah, it's not that far. It's weirdly kind of close. He's like, not so much. So Dave also says that the BBC Micro, quote, was capable of taking several ROMs at a time, or read-only memory. It would have been possible, if a bit of a specialized task, to create a new ROM with a message on it and install in the machine Ken was to borrow. Not sure how you would get it to display, but the BBC came with a powerful BASIC built-in. And he's talking about the operating system BASIC. So here's my comment on that. Yes, it's possible. But then I would say, and this is me speaking, we would also need to keep in mind that, sure, you could place the same messages via read-only memory or ROM on all the computers in the maths lab that Ken Webster may have taken home, so that he was bound to get it at some point, but the new message replies to their fresh questions would appear while they were in the cottage with the computer, albeit usually in another room to maybe, give it some space. Remember, that was part of the process, is that you couldn't sit there and stare at it and it pops up. You had to kind of walk away. I don't know why, but it's like a magician. Don't look back here, just come back in a few minutes. But they were with the computer the whole time, at least in the same general area. So think about it. A merry prankster would also have to be able to sneak into the kitchen to upload a relevant answer to their questions after reading it. Or they would have had to correctly predict the repeated questions in a session ahead of time that Ken and his friends were putting forth. And that seems highly unlikely. Maybe even more unlikely to me than some metaphysical force communicating with them via the computer. So, what I'm saying is that you could preload the messages or the responses, and you could do it for all the computers in the lab.
Yeah.
But then you would have to know what Ken's going to ask.
But this is what I call and I coined this, it's called the Fortress of Solitude conundrum.
Very nice.
And this connects back to the Superman movie, which I'm sure was rooted in comics, when Lex Luthor actually gets up to the Fortress of Solitude and he goes and he puts the crystals in the tubes and he asks the right questions that were pre-programmed for Superman's education. And he's like, oh, look, I asked the right question. It's like, if you don't ask the right question, it doesn't make sense. So yes, there's a predictability issue going on here. Also, you can say what you want about, well, you could probably do this. Yeah, now here in hindsight, everyone's hacking all over the place. We're hacking left, hacking right. There's passwords being ripped off. Like, this would have been a very sophisticated operation for back then to say, all right, we're going to plant this secret message on all 12 or 14 or 8 or however many of these computers in the maths lab at the school. We don't know which one Ken is going to bring home. We're going to put them in there. And not only that, it's going to pop up a message. It's going to come up at a certain time, which should theoretically coincide when they're not looking at the computer, and it's going to answer the question that it did. Come on. Come on with that. And no disrespect to people who are speculating on how this might have worked, because we need to look at it that way. I agree with that. But there's just too many ifs here. It's like, and it's the thing that Forrest and I often talk about. It's like, your explanation is more crazy than the craziest explanation of what they were originally thinking. It's like, you might as well say, a little green man came out and got out of a spaceship and typed it in when no one was looking. To me, it's that plausible as all those other events lining up.
Yeah.
Again, no disrespect. I love that I want to have these discussions about how this works, but I'm just not on board with it. Here's the other thing I want to say is, like, in terms of the definition of the system being developed locally and how many miles in the US and how many miles in the UK, I did want to indicate that when we took that fact, that came from a discussion board where people were trying to dissect from a skeptical viewpoint the likelihood of the software and the connections between Edward and the proximity and all that stuff. So, and those people were probably from all over the world because it was a message board on the internet.
Right.
That wasn't necessarily us saying it or something coming from the book. So that's all I wanted to say about those two things.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought all this up, Forrest. I love that you flushed this out, by the way. I'm just going to stay here in the bush while you flush the wild animals out into the...
Oh, there'll be some nasty critters.
Yes,
I'll guarantee, and some sticky wickets here. But we're getting through these. It's important. I want to understand this stuff.
Yeah,
Scott and I do. That's why we started the show, is to understand and pass along knowledge. We just hope to pass along as correct knowledge as we can, or as factual as we can, given that this stuff is all crazy. But the things that we can confirm, we want to relay those as factually as we can. And we want to share other people's thoughts that have written to us. So we comb through all the emails that were specifically talking about the vertical plane so far. We haven't received, of course, any emails from part 2. I'm just waiting for those. That should be interesting.
Yeah, but by then we're going to be into our October special, which is completely unrelated to this.
Yes. Save your typing, folks, because all this knowledge would be totally have evaporated from our brains.
Well, no. You know what? Here's the thing. This is stuff that we can work back onto our Patreon and onto Fireside and talk about some of these things as the conversation is ongoing. But yes, we are moving on to a new topic just next week. So
exactly.
Several years ago, I switched to Mint Mobile when they first sponsored our show, and I could not believe how much less expensive they were than the big wireless provider I used to be with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Forrest, I think we talked about it on the show when Mint first sponsored us. I used to get so angry at those monthly bills, but I thought, what can I do? I need a cell phone. I'm one of those folks who think, what if I have an emergency? What if my kid has one and someone needs to call me? So I felt trapped, and I feel like that big wireless provider, I feel like they knew that. It's no wonder they're so expensive. Everywhere you go, they have stores. Stores. Can you imagine how much all that real estate costs? I'm guessing it has to be millions. And you know who's paying for it? Their customers, which is you if you're not with Mint Mobile, where you can get premium wireless service for just $15 a month.
How does Mint do it? Well, they're online only. That's how. No retail stores, no overhead that you have to pay for in some kind of mystery fee on page 29 of your statement.
Yeah, like the connection extrapolation crossfire networking charge.
Yeah, that's not real.
No, I didn't know, but it may as well be. I mean, all they do is they just fill this as pages and pages.
Okay.
of crap.
Well,
You know,
listen,
like that.
Scott's right, folks. Mint does offer premium wireless service for just $15 a month. And all of their plans come with unlimited talk and text, plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network.
Plus, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same number along with all of your existing contacts.
I know you don't want to lose that sweet, sweet New York City 212 area code.
Dude, that is impossible to get, my friend, especially on a cell phone.
Well, here it's the 213, but that it wasn't cool. Now it's cool again.
Yeah,
Anyway,
there you go.
well, look, if you're not 100% satisfied, Mint Mobile has you covered with their 7-day money-back guarantee. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month.
To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/AL. That's mintmobile.com/AL.
Cut your wireless bill to just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/AL.
So Emily and I went out of town this past weekend for a little mini staycation to celebrate her birthday.
Yeah, I know. Well, did you guys have a good time?
We did. We stayed at a nice 4-star hotel in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it was pretty great. I'm guessing it's the one that the Rolling Stones stayed in a few nights earlier because Mick Jagger posted a shot on his Instagram where he's having a beer alone at a bar just a few minutes away.
Yeah, I saw that. Well, no one recognized him, right?
Apparently not. Anyway, that hotel was great, but I sure did miss my purple mattress. I slept okay, but I wasn't nearly as comfortable as I am back home. It has to be because only purple mattresses have the grid. That's the super cool ventilated design that lets air flow through the mattress and helps you sleep cool and comfortable. The grid is also amazingly supportive for your back and legs while cushioning your shoulders, neck, and hips. And I can tell the difference because my lower back bothers me sometimes, but any issues I used to have with it are virtually non-existent since I got my purple mattress.
Yeah, the grid is not like memory foam, which remembers everything, of course. Instead, it bounces back as you move and shift, so you don't wind up feeling stuck in a hole like you do with memory foam or being pressed into clay.
Yeah, it's like a Velcro wall except Jell-O. Yeah.
Exactly.
Try your purple mattress risk-free with free shipping and returns. Financing is available too.
Purple is comfort reinvented. Right now, you'll get 10% off any order of $200 or more. Go to purple.com/AL10 and use promo code AL10.
That's purple.com/AL10. Promo code AL10 for 10% off any order of $200 or more.
Purple.com/AL10. Promo code AL10. Terms apply.
Hello everyone, I'm Elizabeth, here with my ghost detecting pup Lola, and this is Astonishing Legends. Let's get back to the show.
Here's what's interesting is that as people are trying to be analytical, and we do as well, you start to think like, okay, what are the practical ways of getting information or data, prank or not, onto the computer that Ken and his friends are using? Well, like as we said, we looked at one way. It's like installing several ROM chips or data onto a ROM chip. Yes, that could be done, but as Dave himself says, it's a specialized procedure. Not sure how you would do that, and certainly not very likely to change that out as the questions are being asked and people are in the room with the computer.
And also reminder, it's multiple computers. And you never know which one he's going to bring home. Yeah.
You could load them all on, but
Yeah.
the probability is very, very low. As we'll see in the discussion, the skeptical researchers that were trying to debunk this, their explanation was akin to people sneaking in. And
Yeah.
when I heard that, I had to chuckle. So, but we'll hear about that in the show later on. So let's talk about, though, how possibly data could have been then, you could say, beamed onto the computer. Well, modems. We talked about modems. And I'm not sure which one of us said, but it's like, well, they generally weren't available to the consumer.
Well, that was me. I said that.
And
I appreciate your diplomacy. No, it was me. Yeah, it was me.
Well, here's the thing about that. It's like what Scott was saying is that, yes, they're around. How many of you folks that are our age in your 50s remember having a modem at your house or goofing around on your computer? Unless you were working in that field. And even then, you most likely had the modem at the place you were working, not in your house. Not when we started, not like when we remember we started to get the 14.4 home modems and the 28.8K modems and a ding, ding, and it would do that sound, and that's how you connected to the internet.
Yeah, in 1984, it was like a 2400 baud, B-A-U-D.
Yeah.
That was what you got.
Right.
I mean, I do remember those days, but...
So we had a couple of comments, just one email. And folks, if you sent an email and we didn't get to it, it got lost, please accept our apologies. These are the ones that stuck out to us, and we just kind of collected quickly
Or
here.
I deleted it because it made me look stupid.
That's true.
No,
I'm kidding. We'll do that with the rest of
I
these.
didn't do
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry.
We keep
did
them
not do that.
all.
Yeah.
We actually do keep them all.
I just want to make sure that we didn't screw up anything royally here. But in the case of modems, some people had comments. John Griffith says, listening to the episode, and more than once during the intro, the claim was made that modems were not available to the general public. Well, yeah, it was a bit of an exaggeration, but generally that's the point we were just making right now, is that, yeah, you could get one. It just was not a common thing. So John goes on to say, this actually isn't the case. If you Google 1984 Radio Shack TRS catalog, you will find on page 33 a selection of 3 modems sold by Radio Shack to the consumer, ranging in price from $99.95 to $699. That's a lot of money back then. From my point of view, this puts the theory of the computers in question, that they were able to connect to another computer, in serious question. So he's like, okay, they got to consider that. They were available, then perhaps somebody could be hooking up one computer to the other, and that's how they get the messages on there. Another listener, Renee LaPerriere, I hope I'm saying that right, says that she was using a modem in grad school in 1982. Now, that is similar to my experience. So she's just saying basically that she was taking a social sciences reference course in library school in 1982, and that's how they connected to the database with a dial-in modem. And she says, well, nobody knows about that. Now it makes her feel a little bit older. But join the club. You're all along with us who remember those days. So here's the lowdown on modems generally from just the wiki entry. A modulator, demodulator, or simply a modem is a hardware device that converts data from a digital format intended for communication directly between devices with specialized wiring into one suitable for transmission medium, such as telephone lines or radio. It's taking data from one machine, modulating it, sending it as a signal over a line, in this case a phone line, and demodulating it, so expanding it. It's kind of like when you compress a file for size.
It's like that room in Willy Wonka when the kid goes up in the thing.
That's exactly right.
Comes down on the other side. But here's what I want to say about this. No matter how wrong I was about the time period that some of this stuff took place or didn't take place, or whether these modems were available, or whether it was a TRS-80 or whatever else, I don't really feel like that plays into the scenario relating to this story, and it doesn't affect the veracity of the story. This story is either, in my opinion, entirely true and unexplainable, or completely fictionalized.
Okay.
Like it is full-blown Ken Follett, whatever. It's like people are, I just don't want listeners to the show to latch on to, because we did have a very candid, fun, off-the-cuff conversation with Richard on this, which you're going to hear more of here in a minute. But my point is just like, if we're shooting from the hip and like, well, I don't know if they didn't have modems and then it's like pow, pow, pow. It's like, just because I'm making some assumptions that are out of date, that's not necessarily shouldn't affect how you perceive the details surrounding the story, which should be taken from the book directly. So that's...
Yeah, absolutely. Hang on to that thought, though, because I have some comments on your thought, which is basically my thoughts, but you just said them now.
Okay, great.
Hold on. Save your questions until the end of this segment.
Okay.
Yeah, getting back to the wiki description here, it's like a common type of modem is one that turns the digital data of a computer into a modulated electrical signal for transmission over telephone lines. I think I just said that.
Yes.
So basically, you have to be demodulated on the other side. Well, what about the history? One of these things start to come into play for the general populace. Here's what was interesting. This is also from the entry. Modems grew out of the need to connect teleprinters over ordinary phone lines instead of the more expensive leased lines, which had been previously used for current loop-based teleprinters, automated telegraphs, that kind of stuff. So in 1941, though, the Allies developed a voice encryption system called Sigsally, or Sigsally, Sigsally, which used a vocoder to digitize speech. Pretty interesting, huh? Then encrypted that speech with one-time pad and encoded the digital data as tones using frequency shift keying. I love World War II tech, the stuff that they figured out in a very short amount of time, mind-blowing. So there you go. This is a digital modulation technique, making this an early modem. So commercial modems, it goes on to say in the wiki entry here, is they largely did not become available until the late 1950s, when the rapid development of computer technology created demand for a method of connecting computers together over long distances, resulting in the Bell Company and then other businesses producing an increasing number of computer modems for use over both switched and leased telephone lines. Point here, not the consumer so much. We're talking about companies. We're talking about the military. You're talking about people who have need to transmit big data for them at that time over long distances, not for folks writing alternative cabaret sketches. So we now know the definition of a modem and a little bit about their historical availability. But here's the relevant point about a modem and the story of the vertical plane, to Scott's point. Available or not, Ken Webster's BBC Micro was not set up with a modem at home. As for what he and his friend Nicola Bagley were using it for, to write alternative cabaret sketches, there wouldn't have been a need to connect to the Hardin School, their mainframe, for their personal entertainment uses. Okay,
Well, what if David Letterman was trying to fax jokes into him or something? Wait, that would be a fax machine.
Sorry. Right. Now, those were a lot of fun and very useful in their day, but at this point, there's no modem. Also, I believe Ken said that they didn't have a modem hooked up.
That's true. He did say that. Yeah.
Yes, he did say that. Right. So there's no modem. Also very interesting. Tonight, you're going to hear about paranormal investigator Gary Rowe, who was there at the time doing experiments as best he could with the computer in the cottage at the time with the people. He had some very interesting insights. If you want to jump ahead, you just can't resist. You can read about him in the comments section of that Mercurius Politicus blog.
Which is in the links from part 1, right?
Yes, yeah, they're in there. So you can wait till the end, or you can jump ahead. You're not really going to learn. They're just going to talk about stuff you don't know about yet. But some people are like that. They want to jump ahead. It's fascinating.
Mr. Spoiler.
No, I would say there's no huge spoiler other than because Gary himself does not spoil anything, but he teases a few things that are quite interesting. So it's not gonna blow the story for you. You're not gonna find out, oh my gosh, time travel is real. Gary found it. That's why weird stuff's been happening to me all week. Not the case. In this case, Gary Rowe conducted experiments with the various BBC microcomputers at the time in the cottage, as I said, with the people involved. And he states in the comments section of this Mercurius Politicus blog that they did experiments with the computer while electronically shielded inside a Faraday cage, which would prevent electronic data being beamed to it, if you will, to the computer. And they still received messages on it while they waited. So even if you could send a radio signal in there and screw up the ROM chips with an electronic magnetic pulse somehow, didn't seem to happen here. They thought of that. They prepared that test for it. Stuff was still appearing. Answers to their questions, specific, not very general ones. I was about to mention earlier, there's a great 60 Minutes piece about a project to take Holocaust survivors and get all of their experiences and thoughts in a holographic 3D environment where you can ask them questions about their life. And the way that, Scott, that you were talking about, the way it's structured is that it's almost like having a conversation with a lot of these people, unfortunately, that have passed.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's totally, it's so cool. It makes you feel really good to know that before we get to the singularity and the creepy aspect of that in your brain as data being uploaded to the cloud, which I'm not sure I want, this is a nice way of keeping people's memories alive. But you can ask them questions like, what was your favorite song as a kid? Like, what kind of dances did you guys used to do? And the way the AI is structured is that they'll answer your questions and it seems like you're having a conversation with them.
I know that's right around the corner. I mean, already our graphic artist, Josh Sloan, is using the algorithms and the programs that allows him to animate photos of people who have passed into seeming like they're alive and looking around.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just a matter of time. It's a disaster for UFO footage and ghost footage and all that, because now you can do whatever you want.
Right.
You just need an afternoon and an iPhone to make a fake special effects like ghost video.
Yeah, you're talking about my point that I'm trying to make here, in that
Yeah.
it's easier to look at older stuff,
Yes.
like the PGF, and that you didn't have a bunch of baloney. And that's what I love, that people that bag on that thing. No one's ever said that that film itself was fake. They
Yeah.
just think that it's a dude in a costume. Okay. But the film itself was not messed with. And so in this case here, it's seemingly very unlikely that at least somebody from the outside of the cottage is messing with this computer or preloading it with stuff. So here's my last point on modems. We should all keep in mind that back then, a computer, especially a unit at someone's house, being used for personal entertainment reasons, was not usually continually hooked up to a computer network. Nowadays, of course, we boot up our computers or devices. They automatically connect to Wi-Fi. We think it's just natural, like breathing, and we just leave them all connected on all the time. Now, when I was at the University of Washington working in the campus photography lab, this would be 1984-85 in that school year, I would do data entry on all the film negatives that were shot by my boss, one of the campus photographers, and others in the photo department. And that data was stored locally on our lab's green screen computer, which is how I entered it. Then every few days or once a week, they would hook up our department's computer, just the one that we had, to the university's archival drives via a phone handset modem, just like in war games. You take the handset, you plug it in, it makes the noise. It was cool for me because I could see the data transferring.
Yeah, it's very matrixy.
Very matrixy. Also, like talking to Mother in Alien.
Yeah.
They're in the little computer room. But that's how you uploaded the data. So that's how you backed up data to a mainframe, not the cloud yet. And also back in the 80s and 90s, you also had to pay for the phone company line connection, and it could get very expensive. So you didn't have it on all the time. I remember years later at another job, someone in one of the video editing suites left a computer connected via the 28.8K modem all night. And then the accountant for the company is like, yeah, why is there an over $100 phone charge
Yeah.
for the edit base? Like, I don't know, maybe a client. You can always blame it on a client because you can't bother them. They're the client. Maybe they left the computer modem on. My point being is that it's just not on all the time. It's expensive. And the only purpose is not for what Ken and Nick were doing with it. They didn't have any data they needed to upload.
Figure out who you're going to connect to, who's out there. Is anyone even out there to connect to
No.
transfer the data? It's like these guys are recording analog audio on a 4-track in a back bedroom. Do you think they have a modem in the kitchen? Give me a break.
Right.
All due respect. And this isn't aimed at anyone who's sending information in. I'm just saying,
No.
I'm putting this out there for anyone who's trying to deconstruct how this might have been hoaxed.
Mhm.
For me, this is either 1,000% true or 1,000% fictional. And I know a lot of people just be like, okay, well, then it's 1,000% fictional. Fine.
Right.
If you go that way, then you're dealing with an author who has a really incredible imagination, who has the ability to come up with the story that has so many bizarre details that don't seem to tie together, but still makes this amazing story. And that's a lot of credit to somebody who's producing something fictionally. And maybe that's what's happening.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I don't feel like we're dealing with a modem in the cottage kitchen connected to a computer that could be one of 8 or 12 computers that is brought home every week, and the modem's being set up so that it can get secret messages. It's too far-fetched. That part of it's more far-fetched than the actual story. So
Yeah.
for me.
No, me too.
I'm sorry. I don't think I explained that very well. But
No, I get what you're saying, because
Yeah.
the people who send us the emails, I think that they realize as well, is that they're just making a point about the modems being available. And so we're extrapolating that point to, well, could you use it then
Yes.
to fake this?
And those valid points on their part,
Right.
but those are rooted in my mistakes technically in telling the story and not what actually happened.
Yeah.
It's
No,
kind of
no,
like
yeah.
latching on to how poorly I relayed the story as opposed to the story itself. Which is, again, I'm not assailing them, because that's what I want
No,
people
no.
to do. That's great. Everyone is thinking critically, and I should have thought more critically before I made the suppositions I did. But like, I just don't think that's what's happening. I think that's off track from trying to deduce
Yeah.
the explanation in this case.
It's something that people knew about, and they want to contribute and they want to comment, and rightfully so. Like, okay, that's the deal, but really, it doesn't prove anything or disprove anything. It's just that, like, well, it's not very likely how this hoax was accomplished, or the phenomenon The real phenomenon was aided. There's something more at work here that is more baffling and mysterious than these mundane explanations.
Well, I think we have proven one thing. There's no question we've
Yeah.
proven one thing, and I think this is the crux of most of the messages that came in, is that my suppositions were idiotic. That's what we've proven. But I want to separate those from the way the book was written, though, because I was the
Right.
one that brought those into the equation, and that's the point I'm trying to make. Most of the things that people said, well, the BBC is this, and oh, no, there could have been a modem and all that. Everything that we got communications about were related to my observations, not
Yeah.
what was in the book. And I want to be real clear about that.
This story has so many details in it, and you really have to read the messages yourself to get a sense of the gist of what's going on. It's so bizarre. And like I said, Scott and I were texting. She's like, wait, did you read what does that mean? What the heck's going on? It's mind blowing and weird. If you leave an open mind to that this could possibly be real, then you wonder, well, where is this intelligence coming from? And we don't know what it is, but it does seem to have intelligence. And like the movie Her, it could be an operating system that is AI, that is just able to mess with us and somehow evolves at some point into something that is, let's say, outside of the cloud in its own existence. So
Yes.
let's move on here, though. I don't want to have too much of a delay till we get to the discussion, but what's fun about this is that we don't often do a mailbag thing, listener mailbag, which is kind of what this is, especially, and this is all apropos to tonight's discussion. Something else we wanted to clear up here was Jesus College. So we had one listener, Elizabeth Bergen, write to us saying they submitted a comment on the website, which has to go through approval process. And Elizabeth, yes, that is sitting in there, but we want to research this first to give you the correct response to your query on the website. And now it's on the show. So hope you're happy with that. We'll try and answer you directly via email as well. So Elizabeth says they wanted to point out that both Oxford and Cambridge universities have constituent colleges named Jesus College. The date quoted, 1571, is in fact the date that the Oxford College was founded. However, Jesus College at Cambridge was founded in 1496, well before Lukas was supposed to have been writing. She says, I didn't catch whether or not Lukas specified a location or university that would necessarily make it Oxford, but the Cambridge College would definitely have existed during the reign of Henry VIII. So yes, I would respond here. Jesus College, the constituent college of the University of Cambridge, was established in 1496 by John Alcock, the Bishop of Ely at the time, and on the site of a 12th century Benedictine nunnery of St. Mary and St. Radegund. The full name of the college is the College of the Blessed Virgin Mary, St. John the Evangelist, and the Glorious Virgin St. Radegund. I'm probably way over enunciating that, near Cambridge. That's a bit of a mouthful. So it's just kind of known as Jesus College, mostly for the school's chapel.
I thought it was Radegund, but okay, if you say it's Radegund, I'm all right. with it.
Radegund. Well,
Radegund.
there's a bit of an Angles and Scandinavian history with England as well. So sounds a little bit like that. Well, the school itself can claim 3 Nobel Prize winners. Now I'm talking about the University of Cambridge Jesus College here, along with notables such as one of my favorite writers, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, modern author Nick Hornby, remember that, About a Boy? That was a fun movie. And Thomas Cranmer, who happened to be the Archbishop of Canterbury during the reign of Henry VIII and in the time of our 16th century hero of tonight's story, Lukas/Thomas. Thomas Cranmer was also instrumental in the annulment of Henry VIII's marriage to Catherine of Aragon, which would eventually, after a couple more annulments and beheadings, lead to his marriage with Catherine Parr, Lucas's queen, as he states. Okay, so from one of Lucas's messages, though, he claimed he studied at Jesus College, Oxford. We may not have pointed that out clearly, but that's what he says in the book with his most important schoolmaster, John Colet. But here's the interesting angle on skepticism within Ken Webster and his book and everybody involved. I could say, like, well, it's a good trick of literature to pretend to be skeptical while putting forth a crazy story. That way you don't seem as crazy. But I generally got the sense that Ken was like, we don't know what's going on.
Wait, who said that?
Oh, I said that.
Oh, it's a good trick. Oh, because isn't that what we do? We pretend to be skeptical? Or...
Yeah. Here's the thing. It's like,
no, we're legit skeptical. There are people that think we're pretending to be skeptical. We have legit skeptical viewpoints, but
no, and you know what?
they get
I've said this
swayed,
a bunch of times. I like this idea. There are lazy skeptics where you don't consider all alternatives and remove the ones that actually factually don't make any sense.
Right.
They just dismiss stuff wholesale without really checking into it because it just sounds too crazy. But that's being lazy. Find out why this can't be possible. In this case here, what I'm saying about Ken Webster and his friends is that as it's written, and I tend to believe the narrator in this book, even though everyone's a trustworthy narrator in this book, is that they're incredulous. They're like, we don't know what's going on. All we know is that we're probably being made huge fools of. And the more people we get involved with this, the more people at the school we ask about this, the more of a stink and people know about this stuff, the bigger idiots we're going to look like when this gets all exposed as a hoax.
Right.
My point here is that people could say like, aha, it's that you can never win. There you go. They're pretending to be skeptical. That way they can still claim some credibility later on where they're saying, there you go. We said we were skeptical, but this is too fantastic to be a hoax. Well, read the book and you'll see what tone you get from it. But that's what I got. And that they just really at the onset have the best attitude, which is we don't know what's going on.
Right.
We're just telling you what's happening. And you can read the messages. We're telling you what the setup was. You take it how you will. That's how we like to present the show. We're not telling you. What is the quote that we didn't use at the beginning here, which is one of my favorites since the beginning of the book. So Ken writes here, these notes are simply to encourage discussion. He's talking about the book. For in all these matters, I am acutely conscious of the inadequacy of my own knowledge, but I share the opinion and optimism of Sir William Crookes, who, when asked to explain how the psychic D.D. Home managed his feats, retorted, I didn't say it was possible. I said it happened.
Right.
I love that. It's just like, there it is. I'm not telling you what to believe, but that's what happened. But back to Jesus College, we can wrap this up here. So this is what I'm saying about the skeptical attitude. Here's the deal with Lukas's claim that he studied at Jesus College, Oxford. In one message, yes, that's what he said. And the problem is that Ken Webster's fellow teacher and head of the sixth form, Peter Trinder, had an issue with Lukas's claim, and that Jesus College, Oxford, was founded on 27th June, 1571, from a royal charter issued by Queen Elizabeth I, Henry VIII's daughter with Anne Boleyn, who lost her head, for the education of the clergy, and the first Protestant college founded at Oxford University. So, Lukas's Jesus College is of the Elizabethan era after Henry VIII, and it would have been, quote unquote, too late for our man, as Peter said, strengthening his belief that this error meant it was all a hoax. Also adding to the disbelief was the error in Lukas's spelling the name of the poet John Skelton as Skeeton, so no L, Sketon, along with another error he found in the Latin that Lukas used. But, again, keep in mind, how many people's emails do you come across nowadays that have spelling and grammar errors in them? And we all have things like spell check and Grammarly to aid us if only people would use them, but they don't. That's my point. Here's a guy from the 1500s trying to send an email, essentially, and he's got some spelling errors. And you say, well, there you go. He's a fake. There's some misspellings. The grammar seems off. I contend we should be a lot more sophisticated with our language nowadays, but most communication is poor. I know we're all busy. I get it. We got to send 1,000 emails a day. You're not checking everything, but we do have spell check. You can turn that on. But even then, what I'm saying is that I don't disbelieve Scott's existence because he sent me an email that had several spelling errors in it. Usually he doesn't. He's very good about his grammar and spelling. But yeah, look at the texts you people send. And if that was proof or supposed proof of some interstellar communication and you offered, it's like, BRB, what the heck is that? This is a fake. This person's an idiot. LOL, what is that? We have no idea what these mean. This person can't possibly have been living in the time of 2021. Who knows what people 400 years from now are going to think? Probably that we're a bunch of idiots and got really lazy with our communications. So that's what I'm saying here. Also, and we keep seeing this and asking, what is time? And is it ever really relevant with stories like this? If you look at the time and the times don't match up, meaning, well, that's what Tomas is saying that he was attending. who the heck knows? As you'll see in part 2, the timelines and possibilities of alternative universes and timelines, and also realities, I guess. It's all over the place. Hard to really line things up to say, there's a one-to-one correlation, therefore it must be true. Now, here's another interesting side note. This is written by Dusty Hall, who emailed us to say, I'm a fan of Astonishing Legends. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being on the Fireside Chat.
Yeah, and I just wanted to quickly say we conversed with Dusty conversationally in our chat on our Fireside chat that we did. And that's something I should have mentioned before now, folks. We have been on the Fireside app, which is now publicly launched. This is an app where you can go and participate in live discussions with us. And we did one of these. If you follow us on social media, you would have seen about this. Also, we made an announcement on it in our RSS feed, where we did a post-mortem discussion on the Vertical Plane Part 1 with Richard Hatem. And Dusty was there, and we took questions and had discussions and all of that kind of stuff. And we're probably going to do it again for Part 2 here. Not sure exactly when, but it should happen. So just pay attention to all of our social media feeds, or if you see an announcement, if you're a subscriber to Astonishing Legends that says, hey, we're going on Fireside, that's a live show that you can actually participate in. And that's where Dusty Hall engaged with us. Okay, so let's check out this message from Dusty.
So Dusty made an interesting point. Also, this story is covered in another podcast that he enjoys, Unexplained by Richard McLean Smith. And he covered this story in season 3, episode 8 of his podcast. So go check that out. But Richard McLean Smith brought up an interesting point, according to Dusty, in that during this podcast, and you're right, we didn't bring this up. We didn't know about it. In 1984, July, a month before seeing footprints on the wall for the first time, the largest earthquake recorded in the UK hit. It was a 5.4 earthquake and sent shockwaves through Dodleston. And Dusty's wondering, could there perhaps be a link between the earthquake and the activity Ken started experiencing shortly after? So Dusty looked up this earthquake and found that it did indeed occur on Thursday, July 19th, 1984, on the Lillin Peninsula, which is going to be another Welsh name that I did not bother to look up. I'm sorry. L-L-Y-N, Lillin Peninsula, which is approximately 80 miles west of Doddleston. So Dusty goes on to say, I did a quick search on poltergeist activity after earthquake, quote unquote, and found an article from 2010 which covered stories relating to increased paranormal activity in Canterbury following an earthquake. So the podcast didn't explore the earthquake theory further beyond mentioning it occurred. So there's a link there. We'll try and have that he's provided.
That's interesting because a lot of that same stuff came up after the tsunami in Phuket, which... And it's the same thing with the earthquake. And, you and I both were in Los Angeles for the Northridge quake. Do you remember all the stories that you would hear about angels on the freeway warning people? And it's fascinating.
Right. Well, it's like the Fukushima incident here. I mean, that was just a lot of tragic death and people, tons and tons of stories of people getting picked up as hitchhikers wanting to go home.
Yeah.
Their home was no more. They're lost. They need to return. And too many stories to ignore as just people just making stuff up because they take this very seriously, as they should.
Yeah.
What I wonder about an earthquake, though, does it jostle? Does it open up the earth, the spirits, the stone encapsulated spirits of the earth, and let them issue forth from the limestone? Who knows? but that's an interesting connection. Yeah, I mean, somebody should look into that. Well, Dusty did all of it. So that was an interesting point. Oh, also, I forgot to mention Crystal Morgan just also asked the Jesus College question and for clarification and kind of made the same points, but also talks about some of the crazier stuff that appeared in the comment section of that blog, The Curious Politicus, that we've been talking about. Dan, where Gary Rowe and Deb herself, Deb Oakes, I think the girlfriend of Ken at the time, may also be chiming in the comment section. Now, people have asked us also in other emails, like, hey, can you reach out to these people and maybe have them on and talk to them? And it's like, I don't think that they want to be on. I think they're not being available so much to come talk to us. Gary might, but I get the sense that there's a lot of stuff, the good stuff that we'd want to know about, he can't talk about.
Right.
Which is fascinating, but he can't talk about it. So you're not going to get much out of him other than me, maybe one day we will, or reach out if anybody knows or set that up.
Folks haven't met Gary yet. Yeah. You're going to hear about Gary tonight.
Yeah. So it's interesting in that he might be able to talk about the experiments that he did, but he cannot talk about the implications or results. There's something holding him back. Okay, last couple of points here. I think we also said that the book was not available, or there was no reprinting. Luke Nye said in part one of the Vertical Plane, there was a discussion about a new edition of the book being published in 2017 in the UK, and a general agreement that it never happened. Well, we just didn't know about it. That was mentioned, and from the comments we've seen in other blogs and comment sections, people talk about that, but they didn't seem to know where it was or if that actually happened. So Luke says, I bought a copy of the book in 2018 from Amazon UK for about 18 pounds. I guess he lives in the US. The publication date is listed as 2018 in the book, and the price listed on the book is 10 pounds. The British Library lists it as a 2017 publication date. It still seems to be about 500 pounds to buy on Amazon UK. So it's out there somewhere. That's what we're talking about. Maybe those scans are. It's another reprinting because they look really clean, other than like the yellowed and lovely copy that Rich got us.
Again, I'm
in
going to say
paperback.
I'm not convinced that all these reprints and or
Right.
whatever are legal, frankly.
No.
I think a lot of people, like, they go look at a book, there's a first edition, and then there's the second one comes out, and it's somebody's torn the book apart and scanned it and reput it. And we've seen this numerous times in multiple episodes. And
Yeah.
so we can't always endorse the additional publications if they're not legit. And so I just want to make that clear.
No.
We're going to tell you where the one that we know is real can be found. But if we can find other ones that they're legitimate second printings, then we'll mention that. But it's not always a legitimate second printing. So it gets tricky, I guess.
That's a great point, brother. And I wanted to say, Scott and I respect publication copyrights and
absolutely.
everything to the fullest. And because we wouldn't want our show, actually, it has been.
Yeah. But every few months, we have to send cease and desist somewhere. So
Somebody has taken our show and posted it on a platform that is not ours. I guess they're just hoping if we really, really blow up. So after 10 billion YouTube views, maybe they might make a few $1,000s.
yeah, well, it's
Good luck on that. We're hoping for that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so here's in all seriousness, though, that's why we're not going to offer a PDF copy that's been offered to us or distribute that around, because that violates copyright law. So
Yeah, if we can track the provenance of it and it's legit and it goes back to the publishing house or the author, then we're happy to share that, just for the record.
yeah, absolutely.
But the thing is, apparently you can find it out there. If you dig around, you can find.
Right.
That's great. And anytime we do a show and we say we can't find this or that and the other, you have to know that we're sticking to verified, legitimate sources as much as we can. And there may be other ones that fall into that category, but we don't always have time to vet them. So
Yeah. Here's the thing, though, through the generosity and diligence of a handful of listeners of ours, we did provide a link, or they provided us a link and the rest of you to read it online from archive.org. So there you go. Knock yourselves out. It's a great read. You are not disseminating, well, I hope that archive.org, that's a legal process, but that's not our business. So hopefully that is just on the internet there. You can Google it yourself and go take a look. But yeah, we're not in the business of selling PDF copies. So now we come to the last point, and this may have been my fault here, finally.
finally, one thing out of the 50,000 things.
No, I started off the screw ups with the location that I missed.
The long list of all the things Scott got wrong, and then the one thing Forrest messed up.
Yeah. Oh no, I bookended that. No, I've gotten a few. Also agreed with that. You guys like, oh yes, you're totally right. Let's move on. I started off with a mistake, and this is not the final one. I'm sure there's more that people are going to find. We haven't even got to part 2 in my mistakes.
Yeah,
so
here it comes.
But this is funny. So I was talking about Stand By Me and the old computer. Of course, the narrative device there is you see somebody writing the story of Stand By Me, and at the end they turn off the computer, it seems like. Now, Gary Thomas writes in to say, I just want to thank you for another great show. Thank you, Gary. I heard your comment about the final scene of Stand By Me. If you notice, the character that Richard Dreyfuss is playing shuts the monitor off and not the entire computer. That would have been catastrophic. So Gary says, thank you. And we thank you, Gary. Yeah, I got that actually because somebody made a silly joke comment of like, what are you doing? You just lost the whole book you were just writing. And that stuck with me more so than the actual details of the visuals of the scene. I would purport, though, that if you've done all that typing, you should follow the recommended procedure of properly shutting down the computer, not just turning off the monitor. Who
Right.
knows what could happen when 2109 gets a hold of it and melt a plastic wrapping on your 6-pack of lager. So there you go.
All right, folks, I know that was a lot of explanation, but we wanted to talk about all that stuff because you guys sent in some really amazing stories and emails, and we wanted to address all of them. Now we're going to get back to the rest of the vertical plane with our good friend, Richard Hatem. All right, so we're back here for part 2 of the vertical plane. I'm pretty excited about this because this is where things really start to ramp up in this book. It just gets crazier and crazier and more sideways. And in trying to figure out what's going on, every detail seems to answer a question, but then it also poses 2 or 3 new ones. What you guys might remember from the end of part 1 is we took you through all of the discussions or the exchanges that Lukas was having with the author of the book, Ken Webster, and his girlfriend Deb and their friend Peter. And then at the end of that, it seems like they might actually be on what we call party line, something we've made a reference to on the show before. In the old days when you would make a phone call with a bunch of strangers, actually, and everybody would just sit around and talk in the days before the internet. And so what's interesting about this is they didn't know that someone might be listening in until they came home and there was a message from their friend Lukas that seemed like he was trying to talk to somebody else, someone known as 2109. That's the weirdest thing, is that it's a number. And we read you this quote. I'll read it to you again. This is a message from 2109 to Ken, Deb, and Peter. Try to understand that you 3 have a purpose that shall in your lifetime changes, I'm reading it as it's written, changes the face of history. We, 2109, must not affect your thoughts directly, but give you some sort of guidance that will allow room for your own destiny. All we can say is that we are all part of the same God, whatever he, it, question mark in parentheses, is. So that was the second part of the message there. Again, I will remind everyone that these messages from 2109, there's lots of spelling errors, but they're written in contemporary or contemporaneous English for Ken, Deb, and Peter. It's not in the Old English.
No, but also there are modern British colloquialisms, I guess you could say. One ends with cheers.
Yes.
Does 2109 ever refer to them as gazes?
I'm sure it's in one of the hundreds of messages they sent. So
Does the word bruv ever come up?
Bruv, I don't know. Brotherly love, is that a contraction?
It's one of those that comes up. I think it comes up in like the Kingsman, you know?
Yes.
Someone calls someone else bruv.
Bruv.
You know, it's like bra.
Yeah, it's a bit of chav.
Oh, like brava.
speak.
Brava. Yeah, my
Yeah,
brava.
it's
Like
a
Liverpool kind of, yeah, brava with a V.
Well, I'll let you continue, Scott. I have a few ideas on just the style or the tone of the messages that are coming through, because it's not really what you would expect. On the other hand, it seems like a lot of alien messages. I'm not talking about ETs, just foreign, out of this world, off planet, another realm kind of messages coming through, which are cryptic, odd, hard to decipher, inscrutable, just all that stuff.
I mean, it definitely sounds like it's coming from the future. And because it's
Really?
2109, it makes us automatically think, because that sounds like a year to us. So
Right.
suddenly it's like, oh, whoa. Now Ken Webster is suddenly in the position of Lukas,
Yeah.
where it's like, oh, now I'm not the guy in the future. Now I'm the guy in the past, and there's someone else in the future. And I'm in the middle of the past and the future, which is every single human being's actual life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, think about what this first message talks about, your timeline. I mean, it says that, right?
Yes.
Implying that there's more than one timeline. So that's what we
Right.
get from that. Then it says, we're all a part of the same God. That is a very common message that people get in near-death experiences, that people get during LSD experiences. Oh, everything's connected. We're all connected. But then something else really interesting. It says, we're all part of the same God, whatever he, she, it might be.
Right.
Then implying that whatever this consciousness or intelligence is in the future, it is aware of the concept of God, but it doesn't really know what it is. A lot going on.
2109 references these things, but in a weird way, in that it's like, oh, you with the telephone, you think you're so advanced with the telephone. If you only could see the miracles that await you, from now. But they never clarify what their name means. The only thing that's said about it, they say, and Scott, you can fill us in on what the question was posed by Ken and his team. The 2109 response was, again, we give you two choices. Choices misspelled, together with some help, : what is our name? Now think about this, Rich, if this makes sense to you. Too perfect that we make mistakes, comma. We must have a character, misspelled. Movement that casts no shadows. Thought without chemical reaction. Love without passion. Hate without anger. Wars without life lost. How can we have a name?
Games without frontiers.
If looks could kill, they probably will.
Yeah. I love Peter Gabriel. He would do a much better job than this. So they're not all that high and mighty and great, in my opinion here. It goes on to say, we are many, but no more than one in the time to come. So we are many, but it sounds like you're going to deal with just one of us when the time comes. Whoever it is goes on to say, we have no retirement. Ah, what an age to be if the digits, again misspelled, were reversed! ! And then the word marriage. And I think that appears on page 136 of the paperback. Outset analysis is that if you're thinking that people in the future have figured out time travel, our logic in this present would be, who could do that? Is that something you could buy at the futuristic Radio Shack and put together as a kit? Could you find the ideas and concepts for a time machine online and just have them 3D printed? No, it should probably be either scientists from the future or military people from the future. Possibly, probably, most likely working together. That's how we visualize or conceptualize time travel. It would be an official, carefully guarded type of activity, not open to everybody, or at least some authorities that could afford it or could work the science to facilitate time travel. This does not sound like either governmental or scientific speak.
Yes, but you know what else? Here's my point about what you just said. So far, anyway, there's no evidence of time travel. There's only time communication.
That's the next thing. They will, as we'll see, lay out some rules possibly for time travel that, of course, we all wonder about when we watch time travel movies. Can you meet yourself in the future? Could you touch yourself? What if you kill yourself? All these different movies have different ideas. Looper, 12 Monkeys, they all have different ideas on what's possible. Time Cop. This idea from 2109 follows the Time Cop idea that bad guy Ron Silver or anybody, really, you can't meet yourself and touch yourself because at that point, you just evaporate.
Well, that's weird because I got to tell you, if I could time travel and meet myself, the only reason would be to touch myself.
Well, you'd probably want to make it a party, so you'd get the two of you would then get in the time machine, visit a third person, the three of you, and basically just duplicate that until you don't want to buy any more snacks for your party, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, so here's the other thing that's happening, though. Now that 2109 has entered the picture, the poltergeist activity actually is starting to ramp up. And there's no way to cover everything in this book. Hopefully people can find copies of it. There's a lot going on with messages appearing on the floor, cryptic chalk messages. Enter the unknown and you enter dark. How foolish be the children without a torch. That was written on the floor in the house. There is a picture of that. There's a picture of the Jaguar, too. And a picture of Deb. She's the only person featured in the book, which is interesting to me. Deb using the computer, and a picture of the computer, but not the screen. And the computer from the side looks a lot like a Commodore 64 or something. Early 1986. And that picture was taken by Frank Davies. That's one of the researchers. So I guess that's why they have that picture. So what I was going to say is the activity, the poltergeist activity is ramping up, and one of the most extreme events happens not too long after this. And I want to read about this activity right here. This is pretty crazy. The amount of power displayed here is interesting. Now, after this, I want to follow up with what 2109 says about poltergeists. Just going to read a page or two here. This is page 132 from chapter 18, the 15th of May. Debbie is coming back to the cottage. And this is from her perspective. I dropped Ken off at school after spending the night at East Green, then drove over to the cottage to feed the cats. It was 9 a.m. It was not until I walked up the path to the front door that I sensed something was very wrong. Perhaps it was the cats sitting on the garden wall watching me, rather than circling my feet as they usually do, which prompted this unease. I turned the key in the lock and pushed the door open. In the living room, I came face to face with a 6-foot-high pile of furniture. It appeared to me in that instant to have been tossed by the little finger of a giant. I took a step back and out of the door and slammed it shut. The cat still watched me in silence from the wall. I didn't know quite what to do. I walked round to the back with the intention of looking through the window, but I felt unable to do this for a time. I dreaded to think what mayhem there might be. When I did look, it was clear that the kitchen had gone crazy too. Only now did I start to rationalize. It was burglars or local kids, perhaps. Then I remembered what Ken had written on the computer last night and all the anger and frustration he'd felt. So, in regard to that message, that was after they had gotten several messages from 2109 that they found frustrating and the data was incomplete on. And so the night before, Ken wrote to 2109 on the computer. He just wrote 2109. Any more riddles? ? ! Exclamation point, question mark. He was ticked off, I guess. And so she was thinking maybe that this is what triggered that. She says, trembling, I recovered the phone from the hearth, fumbled with the dial, rang Ken's school, and left him an urgent message. Then I rang Dave Lavelle, that's a friend of theirs, and got him to come straight down. Eventually, I gathered enough of my thoughts to examine the havoc. And this is the part that I wanted to share because the sheer power of this is astonishing, actually. Everything movable in the room had moved towards the kitchen and was piled against the door. Chairs, bicycle, Dave's tool chest. Some of the tiles had even been pulled off the hearth. Up on the roof beam, the old copper pan had twisted on its axis and the handle was at an angle of nearly 90 degrees. This is one of the interesting things about the book, too. By the way, they have a picture of this. They took a photo of this, and I don't know if you guys saw it. Did you see this picture?
Mm-hmm.
No. Wait.
Yeah,
hold
that's
on.
in the book.
Oh, wait.
in the-
Oh, no, maybe I have seen that. I'm sorry. It's in the book.
Yeah. So you can see all the furniture piled up. You can see the bike, everything. The room looks like they moved out practically. And, somebody just piled all the furniture over there.
So if you take this in the greater context of all paranormal activity, all of this, including the computer messages, it's all poltergeist activity.
Mhm.
Okay?
Right.
There are other famous poltergeist cases that involve written messages. One of them is, of course,
Mhm.
This House is Haunted by Guy Lyon Playfair about the Enfield poltergeist.
Oh, right.
Mm.
Enfield.
And the Surratt group, the Skull Experiment. Again, you've got a group of people doing seance work and trying for physical phenomenon and getting written messages. So there's a long history of this. The best book I've read about poltergeists recently is called Blythe Spirits by S.D. Tucker.
Yeah, we mentioned that. I put that as a book list offering on the webpage for Siren Call, I believe.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, no. You know what it was? It was our Christmas Roundtable show. I believe you had mentioned that. And so there's some good titles there.
What's cool about this book is that it mentions a million different poltergeist cases, and then you can just go in the back and find out what book he's referring to. So by using this book, you can buy about 150 other books about poltergeists. Because he's read them all, and he just dips in and out for his own purposes. And he states up front, this is not a book about poltergeists per se, as much as it is about the nature of poltergeist phenomenon and how it relates to the trickster. Now, of course, there's another book by George Hansen called The Trickster and the Paranormal.
Exactly. Which has been on my list forever. You've read that, right, Rich?
Oh, yeah. And there are parts of it that are pretty dense. This book is mostly written in fun, not to mean that it's not written seriously. It is. Right. But it's written in such a way to point toward the absurdity of poltergeist phenomenon, and yet how it does somehow configure itself around the aspects and personality traits of what we call the trickster. I just want to very quickly read one very short quote from the book. It goes like this. The poltergeist is a trickster. The biggest mistake we can make is in taking the trickster literally. That's this entire book. The vertical plane is the most literal trickster, the most literal poltergeist I've ever encountered because it manifests primarily through words and through these messages from the past and from the future. And nowhere is the trickster nature of the poltergeist phenomenon in Dodleston, which is the case we're talking about. Nowhere is it more clear than in the messages from 2109, which are all riddles, all challenges, all threats, and make very little sense and provide no real answers.
Except for in this convenient moment, Rich, on page 213 and 214, 2109 explains how poltergeists work.
Let's hear it.
To Ken in this message. Are you ready? I'll skip the first part here, and it just goes, it is correct for you to assume that the poltergeist phenomena is present in the communications, but we can say very little about this subject, as only what you will know already. For reasons surely evident to you three, poltergeist phenomena as follow. Surplus kinetic energy projected by either one or more individuals or by storage channels held within buildings and places where strong emotions such as frustration have been felt most common, energy centered around an individual released for many reasons, usually children of the ages between 12 and 19, 87.9% girls. In all but 3 recorded cases, it's not plural. In all but 3 recorded case, no injuries inflicted by the source. Last cases of injury sustained by a falling beam, spelled with 2 E's, recorded in 2006. Keep in mind this message was authored in 1985. The force is usually an extremely foul entity, which seems to thrive on strong adverse emotions, making little sense in its communication. It seems to play on an individual's fear, again with 2 E's, dislikes lack of attention, has been thought at one stage that this is the individual's cry to be noticed. There is more said about this phenomena, but it would not be of interest to you. We have stopped with 1P communication between Lukas and yourself until things cool down, in quotes. Then you may continue as before. Lukas's time will stand still relative to your time so that you may start where you left off. 2109.
Notice how 2109 separates itself from poltergeist phenomenon. Even though it's pretty clearly part of the phenomenon, it separates itself and goes, oh yes, certainly there is poltergeist phenomenon and we know all about it. And all I'm going to tell you is stuff you already know about it, except for one case that happens in the future, which hasn't happened yet. Isn't it like the very first message that Joe Fisher got from the channeler when the very first thing he heard was a warning? Well, take it from me, the spirit voice you're listening to now. Spirit voices lie. So you've got to be very careful. The implication, of course, being, I don't lie. It's those other spirits that lie. So 2109's not a poltergeist, but it knows all about poltergeists, and it can talk to you about poltergeists all night. But don't call it a poltergeist.
You open the portal and you get your feet dirty. Somebody's tracked in some, paranormal dog do. You come in and also now your furniture's messed up. We just came by to drop off a note.
It's the perfect con. The con always starts with a guy showing up saying, has anyone been by trying to sell you something? Be on the lookout for con men. Let me help you.
Yeah.
It's the perfect con.
Where are they getting these facts and figures? Usually children between the ages of 12 to 19, 87.9% girls. Did you guys do a study like in the future? Or are you pulling these facts from research that you've gleaned from us? The other thing I wanted to mention, Rich, our conclusions and analysis in What Seeka Wonder Part 2. When you look at it seem to be the 2 major philosophical fork in the road here in the Spiritist movement, different than the spiritualist movement. In the academic Spiritist movement, the location or source of the phenomenon seems to be, there's 2 schools of thought. One, that it is actually spirits, that these are spirits coming through psychic mediums. That's where we're hearing the information. That's how they know the unknowable. And that's where they're getting the information they could possibly not know about our deepest secrets and desires. And that's how it's happening. Somehow that information is accessible in the afterlife, in the other world. The other school of thought is that no, these really aren't spirits. Where that information is coming from, even in these strange cases with psychic mediums who seem to have some talent, is mental telepathy. They are pulling the information from our subconsciouses. That's how it seems impossible and crazy. How do you know I thought that? Well, it's a psychic kind of thing, not a spirit kind of thing. So those are the two schools of thought. And when
Yeah.
you talk about this here, is this information then coming from our own subconsciousness or consciousness? But it's a form not of communicating of spirits or technology in this case. It is happening because of some form of telepathy. Those would be the two school of
Right.
thoughts, 1880s to the turn of the 20th century.
How much is the a participator effect in play here?
Yeah.
And how much information is being drawn, as you said, from the experiencers by whatever that poltergeist energy is, and then feeding it back? There was something we talked about a little bit in part one, but it's very Mothman prophecies-esque when they were getting that information from Lukas early on. It's almost as if the minute they did their research and found out that some of the things he said were inaccurate, Lukas came right back and explained the inaccuracies. Oh, well, it's inaccurate because I was testing you. And it reminds me of what John Keel used to do when he was in Point Pleasant in 1966 and 1967, talking to the disembodied voices on the phones and trying to figure out what was going on. He started doing a particular experiment because he began to notice it seemed like these entities were reading his mind. So the experiment he tried was, okay, without talking to anyone, without writing it down, I'm going to formulate a theory about what these voices are and where they come from and who they are and what they are. I'm not going to talk to anyone, but I'm just going to formulate it in my head and give it some detail. And then typically in the very next contact he would have, these intelligences would confirm the new theory. They would make reference to it in some way and seem to imply that that is exactly where they're from, what they are, and what they're doing. And then he would change the theory, and then they would change what they were supporting. And this is, an experiment he did for himself, but it's something that he wrote about in the Mothman prophecies in the book. And it seems to reflect so much of what we've talked about with the hungry ghosts. Just when Joe Fisher is really starting to suspect them, that's when they redouble their efforts to be believed so that contact isn't cut off.
These are interesting ideas that we've discussed ourselves about the cause of a more spiritual nature or spirit oppression or spirit harassment or spirit attachment is that if this is somebody faking this, putting this on a machine somehow, they have some of the, I think, the more fruitful ideas about spirit harassment. And that one they talk about, yes, poltergeist phenomenon. Weirdly, the message starts off with dig, like a hipster would say.
Well, they were responding to him because he
Right,
finished his prior message with that. Like he was mad and he
Yeah.
said, "Do you dig this?" And then they wrote, it was a sarcastic reply,
Dig.
copying his colloquialism.
Right. That's what I'm saying is that they're trying to use slang in a little bit. And also it's some of it,
mimicry.
It is mimicry here, but it goes on to be a little bit more serious in that the tone changes 2 or 3 times within the same message. He's kind of lambasting human beings here for a bit. Again, saying, misspelling possibly, but we do not speak any gloom and doom, but possibly you refer to the forces that you yourselves have unleashed against our better judgment. So it's like, yeah, it's your fault, dudes, that everything's screwed up here in these multiple timelines later on. But aside from that, let me just explain what we think is going on with spirit harassment. So they go on to describe a couple of interesting ideas that we've talked about on the show quite a bit. One, that the poltergeist phenomenon is this kinetic energy, as Scott said, stored up in buildings and places, perhaps like this stone tape theory of porous stone materials, spolia, old materials being reused, like from a graveyard. Suddenly you got ghosts again. That is somehow the surplus kinetic energy being stored in these materials, places, or by individuals. And also, we talk about this a lot. They seem to happen quite a bit where strong emotions have been displayed. That's why hospitals are haunted, churches, theaters, places where big emotions have been expressed, life, death, even just playing at that with theaters. Frustration, places where people died, there's frustration, there's sadness. These places have increased poltergeist activity, but also most commonly centered around an individual. But then again, released for many reasons. So that's another thing that we talk about when we consider poltergeist activity is that center around usually an individual, usually younger, as I said here, usually female, 87.9% girls. Again, don't know how they got that figure if they're doing studies from wherever they are. But generally, that's what's commonly known now. I also don't know about these cases they cite, but here's also where it gets interesting because I've heard psychic mediums talk about what types of entities attach themselves to people and cause trouble, even like our sludge entity case. The force, it says, is an extremely foul entity which seems to thrive on strong or adverse emotions, making little sense in its communication. It attracts itself to people, as we've said a bunch of times, who could be emotionally troubled, young and vulnerable, or suffering from something. There's illness, there's addiction, something where they're compromised or just easy pickings. They seem to focus on that. And it doesn't make any sense in how they display their attachments or their taking advantage of the energies of these individuals. And another big one here, a lot of these attacks seem to play on individuals' fear, and that fear is a very strong energy, very strong emotion. A lot of human energy is released. That seems to attract them and what they feed off of. That's a very common and ongoing theory about negative entities being attracted or wanting to scare people. That's why they lunge at you in your bed and try to strangle you because suddenly now you're releasing a lot of adrenaline and energy, and it's just like it charges them up. It turns them on, quite literally.
I mean, I don't know for sure. I've told you to watch it, but I know you don't have kids. Have you seen Monsters, Inc.?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Okay, because that's how they get their fuel, remember?
Right.
At least initially.
The new show is that they have to make them laugh. They have to make the kids
Right.
giggle.
That was, in the sequel, the laughter had more power.
Right.
Which I think is, it's a good metaphor for good and evil.
What we can all agree on is that there's a lot of energy, and you can feel it. You don't have to be psychic. If you've ever been near a very angry person or two very angry people screaming at each other, it's very disturbing. That energy coming off of them, that anger or kind of an argument or right before a fight happens.
Right.
It's very shocking, disturbing. You can feel it, and it can make you nauseous.
I don't know. In all the poltergeist cases I've read about, I've never come across a case where the family seemed any more troubled or any more emotional than any other family I've ever heard of. And there's certainly other families where they are far more troubled and there's far more violence and trauma and hate and love and whatever. There's something else going on. There is that. There are human emotions. There's human emotions in any house.
Right.
But there's something else. And we don't know what that other thing is. We don't know if it has something to do with the people. That's the thing you can't get away from. There's a quality of humanity involved in speaking to the other side.
Right.
And not everyone has that skill. That's why there's mediums. And that's why not all of us are mediums. That's why some people can walk onto the Queen Mary and feel something or see something, and the rest of us don't. Some people have it and some people don't. And maybe that's part of, and maybe quite rare, the person who has the thing that is required to manifest a poltergeist.
Right.
And even rarer if it's two people who need to be in the same place at the same time with equal and opposite but complementary energies that can provoke and develop a poltergeist, because it is an astonishingly rare phenomenon.
Well, like you said, with psychic ability, some people are better capacitors in the electrical metaphorical sense in that they don't even know it. They're just giving off energy or sparks or storing that, and then boom, you get a big old blue spark, things ignite, things fly around. They're not really aware. I just remember one great case of, it was a toy store, a big one. It could have been a Toys R Us, something like that, when the employees, and of course they're all younger folks working there, they would notice like So who knocked all the toys, in the stock room off the shelves? And it would happen all the time. And then it's like, okay, when is this happening? First, you think of ghosts. So then the employees start to notice, like, well, it only happens when this one dude shows up and it's his shift and that he's working the stock room to restock stuff. And then they start to consider this guy's personality. He's this young, quick-tempered, kind of angry, edgy. And every time that he walked in there, crap fell off the shelves. And I mean, like, flew off. And he just had this bad energy and he was carrying it around with him.
But try to imagine that, a teenager with bad energy. There's got to be only 75 million of them.
Yeah, but that's also the point. It doesn't happen with all of them. It's just that, some people they're just better capacitors. They're giving off energy. They're a conduit. When they come in to a place, it's turned up to 11. So it's different with different people. I'm not sure we realized how much of a business podcasting would become when we got into it.
Yeah, I didn't realize that podcasting is a business, at least if you want to try and make a living at it, which isn't easy. And like any small business, it takes a lot of effort and it takes time. Nothing is more valuable than your time, so stop wasting it on trips to the post office.
Yeah, stamps.com makes it easy to mail and ship right from your computer. You can save time and money with stamps.com. Send letters and packages for less with discount rates from the U.S. Postal Service, UPS, and more.
Stamps.com has been around since 1998, and during that time, it's been an indispensable tool for nearly 1 million businesses. It brings the services of the U.S. Postal Service and UPS shipping right to your computer. In fact, I just used it extensively to ship out most of our t-shirts from the Nashville meetup for folks who couldn't come in person but had bought tickets. It was a piece of cake to pack them up at home, print out postage myself, and then get them in the mail.
Whether you're in office sending invoices or running your own side hustle with an Etsy shop or operating a full-blown warehouse shipping out orders, Stamps.com will make your life easier. And all you need is a computer with a standard printer.
That's right. No special supplies or equipment. You can be up and running in minutes and printing official postage for any letter, any package, anywhere you want to send. Plus, you'll get exclusive discounts on postage and shipping from the USPS and UPS.
Once your mail is ready, just schedule a pickup or drop it off. No traffic and no lines.
Cut the confusion out of shipping. With Stamps.com's new Rate Advisor tool, you can compare shipping rates and timelines to easily find the best option. You can save a ton of money with that.
Save time and money with Stamps.com. There's no risk, and with our promo code, ASTONISHING, you get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage, and a digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts.
Just go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, and type in ASTONISHING. That's Stamps.com, promo code ASTONISHING.
Stamps.com. Never go to the post office again.
Technology is changing the world. I mean, it's been doing that since early man first picked up a stone and used it as a hammer to knock Carl out in the next cave. But these days, companies are coming out with all kinds of new ideas that really do simplify our lives. And one of those is Current. Current is a technology company that lets you manage your money right on your phone.
Current believes banking should be more accessible and affordable with no surprises and no minimum balances. Their easy-to-use app and debit card give you flexibility, freedom, and faster access to your money.
Listen to some of these benefits. Earn points when you swipe with your debit card at eligible merchants, which are redeemable for cash back. No fees on over 40,000 in-network all-point ATMs in the U.S. Helpful spending insights and notifications to track where and when you're spending. And you can easily create savings goals, including the ability to round up your purchases to save the extra change for yourself.
And if you have a Current premium account, you can actually get direct deposit up to 2 days early.
And overdraft protection up to $100 without any overdraft fees. That's all pretty great, right? But here's something even more amazing. For a limited time, we've partnered with Current to give away $1,000.
That's right. Current is going to give away $250 to 4 listeners of our show. All you have to do is download the Current app and enter our code AL during sign-up for a chance to win.
Remember, that's AL during sign-up. Winners will be awarded soon, so don't wait. It seriously took me less than 2 minutes to sign up. I frantically did it just before our phone call with Current about these commercials, and I couldn't believe how simple and quick it was. Wait, does that mean I might win? I could win, right?
No, man, you are not eligible to win, you idiot.
What if I quit? What if I quit the show? Am I
Okay, come on, man. What are you kidding me? Look, the 4 winners are out there, and you're not one of them, okay?
Okay,
So
all right.
listen up. Right now, download the app and enter AL during sign-up. That's all you have to do.
Again, download the current app, sign up in less than 2 minutes, and enter code AL for a chance to win.
Visit current.com/AL for full terms and conditions.
Hi, I'm John Cody. I want to encourage everyone to read more, as well as to think for themselves, to find their passion, and then to pursue it relentlessly. It's the only way you'll ever be happy. Now, back to the show.
So getting back to some of these ideas, yeah, they said these poltergeist energies seem to thrive on adverse emotions, and it plays on an individual's fear. It dislikes lack of attention. It calls out to be paid attention to, like the trickster phenomenon. Yeah.
And like the hungry ghosts.
And it says here, continuing with the message, it's been thought at one stage that this is the individual's cry to be noticed. There is more said about this phenomena, but it would not be of interest to you. Thank you for letting us know what we'd be interested in, or you're not smart enough to figure this out. Then it goes on to say here, we've stopped communication between Lukas and yourselves until things, quote unquote, cool down. They're using, again, a little bit of the your human vernacular, right? You get this? This makes sense to you now if we throw in some terms you're going to get? But here's what's interesting. They go on in another message saying that these entities, they don't have a consciousness as such. It is the energy that is formed into a character. Now, that's interesting because I've had psychic mediums tell me those are the ideas about some entities that plague people. It's not really a demon. It's not a human spirit. It's like an elemental. It doesn't really have consciousness or higher thinking. It has needs and desires. It's more like a bug. Like a bug doesn't reason with stuff. It just reacts, and it will sting you. It will cause harm. It will chew holes in your deck. It just does what it does, and it can be destructive or it can be positive, but it is attracted to human activity and our buildings. And like mosquitoes, it's attracted to our carbon dioxide exhaling from our bodies, and it can actually see it, as some entomologists have claimed. So it's attracted to that, but it's not really a thinking thing in the way that we think of that. It's an energy that is formed into a character. So it gets molded after several small PG, now it's using abbreviations, poltergeist incidents. The individuals automatically imagine the work of a ghost, which most people assume to resemble human form. Therefore, an image is created by the person concerned, which strangely enough influences the forces involved. So the person imagining that it's like, oh my God, who dumped all the plates on the floor? They're thinking it has to be a ghost. That imagination spurring, it's got to be a ghost, right? Which is ghosts are human, or they're dead humans. That's actually shaping the force that's doing this.
Form.
Exactly. And they're working together. And it goes on to say, therefore, an image is created by the person concerned, which strangely enough influences the forces involved. Again, it seems that there is a strong connection between the entities and the person as a nucleus. Sometimes it is considered that to study the person concerned is as informative as the phenomena itself.
Okay, so this book is called Conjuring Up Philip by Iris Owen and Margaret Sparrow. It's about an experiment done by a paranormal research group in Toronto in the 70s. They were a seance group that met every week and tried to contact the spirits of the dead. Well, somebody posed the theory that maybe they were influencing this and that the energy was drawing from them. So they tested it by creating a fake human being named Philip. Here's a picture of him on the back. They drew a picture of him.
Right.
They all contributed to his history. They all came up with when he was born, when he died, how he died, who he was married to, how that marriage ended, all the details of his life. And they spent weeks talking about this made-up character until they all knew him very, very well. And once they really felt like they almost knew this guy, they tried to contact him. And they did. And Philip began answering their questions, and he began answering them correctly.
Was he angry about the hairstyle that they gave him?
He does look like
a
guy from the 70s who directed Summer Stock Theater. That's
it
put
looks
your
like
foot
a
on my heart.
Guest character.
Really? He comes in, he's just like, really? This is what you're giving me? This hairstyle?
Yeah.
So he was answering questions?
Well, they would ask him questions, yes or no questions about his life. And by table raps and raps on the walls, he would confirm or deny the stuff that was true and not true about him.
Right. And this is how you get a talking mongoose. This is how you get something crazy. It's because you're choosing the form.
Well, and they did it very consciously, kind of creating the tulpa, as it were. But I think in many poltergeist cases, it's very unconscious. Like, fears do feed the energy.
Mhm.
And it's interesting how 2109 seems to say, if you're afraid, your fears will come true, which is another way of saying, if you're not afraid, you'll be okay. But there's something a little bit more sinister about saying, don't think about the devil, or the devil will see you and possess you.
Right.
Because that's scary, because then you can't stop thinking about that. And then the more you think about it, the more the devil's going to come and get you.
Well, yeah, it's like, don't lick your lips.
Yeah.
I saw you did it. I didn't even finish it and you did it, Rich.
Yeah, but did I lick your lips?
How many listeners do you think licked their lips?
Oh.
Listeners, whatever you do, don't lick your lips.
How many people do you think have turned this off now? From that
Listeners,
image?
whatever you're doing, don't turn this show off.
It's just the three of us anyway. Yeah.
My point is also the concept of the egregore, that the more the group for conjuring something for a purpose, or the bronies who are trying to use manifestation techniques to conjure their favorite playmates. There's all kinds of reasons now, and they're all strange. You've heard of that, of course, Rich, right?
The brony? What is this?
This could be a fireside chat right here. It's a group of, I would say, guys in their 20s to probably 40s or 50s who are really into the character of My Favorite Pony.
No, My Little Pony.
Oh, sorry.
If you hadn't missed the last meeting, you would know that.
It feels like we're learning a lot tonight.
My Favorite Pony. Talk about a litany of emails.
If you're intimating that, I got the name wrong. So obviously that's...
No, I know. I'm just saying.
Oh,
My
and these
Favorite
are bros
Pony.
who are into the ponies, so they're bronies.
It's a thing. Look it up. You don't want them on your... you don't want them after you.
Well, then why are we talking about them?
Yeah, why are we
It's
talking
come
about them?
after us?
It's like, that's a very large group of dedicated dudes who really focus on this. Could they be any more effective than conjuring a dude named Philip who does look like he teaches a pottery class?
It stands to reason, and people have written entire books about how, if large groups of people believe a thing, then that thing can manifest on a large level. Now, this is not a theory that I personally hold to. I don't think there's a lot of proof of that, especially in terms of fear. I can tell you that in the 70s and certainly in the 80s, a vast majority of the world went to bed every night fearing nuclear war. When I was a kid, I used to have dreams that
I was
there
petrified.
were mushroom clouds just, in the next town over, and it was just a matter of seconds before I'd be obliterated. This was a very real thing. If you grew up in the 80s, if you were alive in the 80s.
Yeah, it was on the news every night, like literally every night. Could happen any minute, even from an accident.
People feared any second every major city in America would be obliterated, and then the rest of the cities would just die in the nuclear winter. But that didn't happen. If it could be manifested simply through the fears of a large group of people, it would have happened a million times over. So I don't necessarily believe that in times of great social upheaval, there are more UFO sightings. I tend to think it's more individual. Things happen kind of one-on-one. UFO, near-death experience, a poltergeist phenomenon focuses on one or a family, but it's not taking over and affecting, the entire state of Utah.
Right.
We haven't seen that. And that's why I tend to think that most of the cases we hear about are pretty localized down to a family or a person.
I think that's a good point. So getting back to our story and the complexities of what is unfolding now, Ken and Deb and Peter are trying to figure out who exactly they're talking to, and they can't really know. There becomes this question in their minds of whether 2109 is really everybody. 2109 is pretending to be their friend from 400 years ago, Lukas. That seems like an easier thing to imagine than a person from 400 years ago suddenly using modern English and doing it the other way around. So they're thinking, well, maybe we're the subject of this experiment, whatever it is, which is what 2109 refers to it as all the time, although they also make clear that they're not in charge of it. And the other thing that happens is they start to have communications with Lukas, who is concerned that 2109 is interfering with the relationship between him and Ken and Deb and affecting the communications. So keeping in mind that all these messages are coming through on this computer that's sitting by itself in the kitchen at their house. And it's any one of several different computers, 8, 10, 12, 14, however many. We don't ever know. We don't know how many were at the school there, but it's any one of these random computers. So they're bringing it home. They've got it in the house, and the messages are coming through. And finally, so they get this message from Lukas. And this is interesting. This has to do with moving the computer. The other important thing to understand here is he calls the computer, he refers to the computer as the Leems, Leems, or the Leems Boist, Leemsbo, I think, Yste. So what's happening right here is because Lukas, and who knows if Lukas is actually an individual or part of this entity's construct, is concerned about 2109 interfering with the messages between himself and Ken and Deb and Peter, he instructs them that they need to move their computer. He calls it a computer when he is referring to them, although he calls it the Leems on his end. He calls it a computer. And he says, in this one message, please do as I ask. Place the computer where my words are. And Ken responded, where be your words? I be confused. And then he remembered that they had been leaving pieces of paper out, carbon, for him to put messages on, and they would get these messages that are like impressions. That's a whole nother thing. The computer's not even involved in that part of the equation. So he goes over and he finds the words, and there's this message continues from Lukas. It says, my fellow, if you would pace 2 legs to the right of the Leems, and right again, then placed the Leems 8 hands above the floor, I think I can answer your questions as to why this is, but keep silence until you have done this for your good friend, Love, Lukas. So then Debbie and Ken go to move this computer. They take it back to where the very first place they had it, but this isn't even that. It's a little bit to the right of that, closer to a column, and then to get it up 8 hands off the floor, they're trying to figure out what hands are. They're using Debbie, because she's had these dreams where she's hung out with Lukas, she's like, oh, he's got small hands, so we should use my hands. So they do that. They stack it up, 8 hands. They put the computer there. As soon as they do, Lukas sends a message that says, you give me time to make all safe. I think, also, here's the cryptic thing at the end of this message, I think that you may all know also my real name. And then he says, Love, Lukas.
This reminds me of an EVP case where a person had initiated contact with a spirit entity through EVP and then began to lose contact. The contact became more sporadic, down to the point where there was just a single word communicated, which was bookshelf. Taking a chance, the experimenter moved the recording equipment from their desk up onto the bookshelf, started recording again, and got a flood of messages.
Okay. There we go. Here we are back to adjusting the TV antenna. Well, the messages continue on here. This one came at 2:00 in the afternoon. Brother Ken, I am happy that we are by ourselves without 2109, for we have much so far unspoken to exchange. I can't think why and with what method we are able to continue without restriction now. Your Leems sits in my dark chimney, where the Leems Boist first appeared with brightness, and the person who made it work is here with me. Before I tell you what is the truth and my name, you must tell me what is your philosophy. I must be acquainted with your position because, my good friend, I think you know better than I do what might happen after this decision is taken.
Does the name Indrid Cold come up at any point?
Yeah, no, but there is a lot in common with Indrid Cold. And so then when it comes to figuring out his name, much earlier in the book, they had reached out to a local librarian who had done a fair amount of research based on the data they had. It was a gentleman named Robin. And Robin way early on had put forth a possible candidate for who Lukas might be. They're thinking that he's not using his real name. And so then they get another message pertaining to his name. I'm going to read just a part of that one. Yes, you have my name in your book. I think, if not, John put Tom. And I think you will understand my name. Those are a couple of other researchers that we'll talk about in a little while. It is also the place of Peter's house. What does this book of names and ages say about me? Love, Thomas. Or Tomas, depending on how you want to pronounce it, because there's no H, but he spelled it Tomas. What's interesting here is he says it is also the place of Peter's house. It's Thomas Hawarden, Hawarden. That's the name they got from the librarian earlier on. And the town that Peter lives in is called Hawarden, or Hawarden's something or other. So he knew that. So here it is. Thomas Hawarden. They figured it out. That's his name. In an instant, Ken says, I remembered Robin Peetle had put this man forward months ago as a likely candidate. Impossible, I had said at the time, but he had been right.
Also, it could be Thomas Harden.
Yeah, Hawarden is later comes on to be, it gets anglicized as Harden. Right. It gets anglicized in a lot of different ways, actually. Yes.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So this is what is written about Thomas Hawarden, or Harden, as it says here, in the reference which Robin Peetle had provided many months ago. Harden, Harden, or Hawarden, Thomas, Brasenose College Fellow in 1530, still in college, 1538.
So wait, he was in college for 8 years? This guy does not sound like a good student.
Charged with expunging the name of the Pope, E quodam manuali, December 1538. Admitted December 12th, 1530. Determined 1531. Ma incorporated 22 March 1535. So not sure what all that means. But basically coming back down to this, Thomas apparently next wrote that the description of him and his time at Oxford made him glee, meaning laugh. He said that the reason given for his expulsion was wrong. Peter doubted this but checked back with care, meaning he went back to see why he was expelled. The standard reference on the history of the college from which Peter obtained the information that I put before Thomas should have been correct. But no, deep in the bowels of Brasenose, some weeks later, Robin Peetle plucked out from an original source record that Thomas Harden was expelled for not crossing out the Pope's name. The standard history is in error. Thomas was an old faither and had evidently withdrawn to an obscure village in Chester to ride out the Henrician Revolution relating to King Henry VIII.
And the separation from Rome and the church.
Exactly. Thomas asked that he still be addressed as Lukas, as the name had become his own and he preferred it. We agreed readily. So here's the thing. Lukas is now Thomas, just so everybody understands. And Thomas is saying, you found a record related to me getting kicked out of school. That's interesting, but that's not the right reason. And they're like, no, the librarian told us. And they're like, well, Peter goes back and looks it up and drills down, and it turns out it wasn't the right reason. So this is another example of knowledge that no one in the area would have had. And it's not telepathic knowledge. It can't be gleaned from someone's brain. This is information that was buried in a book about a guy that lived 400 years ago that on the surface would have seemed wrong. And that's came from the spirit or whatever this voice is of Thomas that's theoretically living in the 1500s.
Now, did they find out any other information about Thomas that connected to anything that Lukas/Thomas said in these communications?
They found some general information, but not a ton. They had a hard time confirming things. And I don't think they ever found, well, they certainly didn't find the book, but I don't think they were able to corroborate anything about his family, his first wife, or Catherine, who met an untimely end, his 14-year-old girlfriend. The other part of this that we left out, and it's just too much, there's, it's a lot of stuff in a book like this, but I'm going to sum up that there's a whole section of this that is devoted to the idea that he is essentially being accused of magic or heresy, or people are reacting to how he's getting this information from the future. And there is a sheriff who, on behalf of King Henry, steps in and starts communicating with them. And the sheriff says he's going to go. In fact, he's going to be executed. And Thomas has all these conversations where he's like, I don't have long to live. I'm going to be executed. This has been an amazing experience, but they don't believe me about how this works. And it goes through all of this stuff, and he gets hauled away, and this new guy comes in, and he says, hey, I'm the sheriff. Tomas is gone, and he starts trying to get information from Ken and Deb and Peter.
The logic of this is so strange. Picture a Ouija board. And picture someone in a culture that is being dragged off to be imprisoned or executed for using the Ouija board. Then the magistrate who is in charge of all this then sits down at the Ouija board and starts communicating with the spirit.
Yes.
Saying, now then, I am here to talk to you. I mean, what is happening here? What is the logic?
And so then the sheriff says, I am Sir Thomas Fowlhurst or whatever. This is a real guy. Real sheriff of Cheshire, lived from 1545 to 1614. Confirmed. I've got a page from Ancestry right here. I'm looking at him. Real sheriff, loyal to King Henry. And here's the other thing that's happening. This gentleman named Governor wants to have the land and is going to force him off the property. And he's doing all these things to fight it. And at one point, Ken says in the book, he was like, I didn't have the heart to tell him that at some point it did fall into that estate before I got it. And so he knew that eventually Thomas was going to lose it to the Governor family, but he didn't want to tell Thomas that. But in the end, that's what happened. Thomas did get forced off the land. But before all of that, he had gone away. They told him through these messages, the sheriff, that he had been killed, that he was no longer alive. He wouldn't be back. And then Ken and Deb, but Ken especially, got really, really upset because he was feeling very intimate with Thomas emotionally. They had become very close, he felt. And so this emotional energy is ramping up, by the way. And he sends a threatening message through to the sheriff. And he says, if you don't bring Thomas back, we're not talking anymore at all, period. End of discussion. And sure enough, a few days later, Thomas is back. And he's like, oh my God, you freed me from prison. Oh, and by the way, just prior to that, Deb had a dream where she was in a dungeon looking up through a metal grate. And she goes, I know it's his cell. And she heard him singing. And she said, I know he's singing this, particular song, which I can't remember now. And they said that stuff to the sheriff. They said, let him out of the prison. We know he's still alive. We know you've got him in a dungeon. Bring him back here or all bets are off. And that worked, or the idea of it worked.
So let's review. A narrative is constructed that causes a lot of anxiety and bad feelings for Ken.
Right.
Gets him really stirred up. Gets him really emotionally involved in the communication. Re-engaged.
Exactly.
He's not bored now. And this results in a further situation that allows the communications to continue in an unlimited way.
Yes. And then 2109 comes back into the picture. Check this out. This was all like in the process. And we're going a little out of order here, but it doesn't really matter. There's all these events are all these events are just all
everybody
insane.
Involved in the story is dead, including us.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I felt about the movie King of New York. At the end of it, it was like, did anyone live? I don't think they did, but I loved it. All right, so here we go. Here's a message from 2109 regarding the fact that they got Thomas's name. Ken, Deb, Peter, we have reason to believe you have Lukas Wainman's true name. If this is correct, you must say so that we may rectify the problem immediately before it is accepted. You may now continue to write to Lukas to establish your responsibility to our experiments and towards a better understanding of time and its forces. 2109.
2109, man.
So then Ken writes back, 2109, I hope Lukas will be allowed to write freely, for if you study time, I cannot see what problem there is over names we would use such information with the greatest tact. How many messages have you edited? Again, I ask, please explain your problem. I wish to know more of time as well. Once Lukas is clearly with us again, I shall be happy to cooperate fully. Please don't fake a message from him, Ken. So you can see where their head's at now.
Yeah.
Then, within an hour, this message comes back from 2109. Get ready for this one. Oh, if only you had listened. At present, you have 2 Lukases running around your house. If at any time the 2 are to meet, we cannot explain the devastation that will erupt within the time continuum.
It's Ron Silver in Time Cop. I'm telling you. you can't touch yourself.
We must stop communication with Lukas 1, but we cannot interfere with the other while we decide what can be done to rectify the problem. You must help by giving us every word uttered by Thomas Howardine from the second you received his true name. You must also state how much information you have on this man. Everything, word for word. Avoid any other communication you may have with him. Desperation. Be quick! 2109. Then they get a chalk message written down on a brick pillar in their house. What are you scared of? Ken, Deb, Peter? ? And then, so I guess Ken sends this message. He says, can't you get these poltergeists out of the place, idiot things? I hope you can put us back in touch with Lukas so that we can talk freely. Ken. And then 2109 responds, yes, we shall hold back as best we can on the PG. Sorry you find us so friendly. Ask the man David what he thinks of conjectural tachyons and what are his theories of causality. What answer does he have for its paradox? Cheers, 2109.
Okay.
Another thing that we have not gotten to yet, but we're going to talk to now as we're getting more in towards the end of this series, is the fact that they've brought researchers in. And so some of these names you're hearing are people that are trying to figure out if something is actually happening here.
Mhm.
But you can just see how much is coming through here. There's 2 Lukases. You can't, what did you tell them? And then, Forrest and I were talking about in the Loki series and the time variance authority. And
Yes,
like
the
there's all this
TVA.
common ground there. And Rich, you've mentioned in lots of other books and probably even things you've written and worked on, there's a lot of ongoing themes here. But what is crazy is how upset 2109 seems to be and how adept 2109 is at making it seem like, at least, that 2109 and Lukas or Thomas are different entities. But
Right.
are they both sides playing against the middle and Ken being in the middle?
I don't know. 2109 sounds like the worst guy at the party.
Yeah.
Just harshing everyone's buzz. Just ruin the guy you don't want. Like, you want to throw a party, but tell him it's the next night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gives no answers, makes no sense, makes a lot of demands. It really is the friend you suddenly realize they're toxic. It's a toxic friendship. You don't want any part of it at a certain point.
Right. Since you've unloaded your ad hominem against 2109, your character assassination, I'll just jump in here with my thoughts. From the tone that's developing here, based on what I had thought of when reading the book and reading these, and then when you hear it out loud, actually read by someone else, Scott in this case, you do get some tone that starts to develop. And like they say about poltergeists and these miasmic energy blobs that somehow through people's imaginations turn into more of a human figure and take on a character, not necessarily consciousness, but a character. This 2109 is starting to develop for me. And what it sounds like is one, as I said before, what they say themselves is that they are conducting an experiment in time. And in a way, time travel, there's 2 ways to do that, with just electronic communication or physically. There are rules to the physical. I think Scott will get to the passages that describe that because that's interesting. It's also ghosts. We've added another cube to the side of the Tesseract and that it's now a sci-fi story. Ken Webster, I like his writing. Loved his sense of humor, very British. I think he would do a better job with the sci-fi ideas if this was totally fiction. And you think that if this was made up by 2109, it would be better sci-fi, but there are some interesting concepts. It sounds like the imagination, the ramblings of not scientists conducting an actual experiment. That doesn't sound like the way scientists talk, as we know them anyway. Maybe they do out in the universe or different dimensions. They're a little bit cheekier. It doesn't sound very mature or serious or academic. It
No.
also doesn't sound like the military, like a governmental organization, which is just like, well, we're here to save the future. We need you to do this.
It sounds like Han Solo when he's in there trying to hold everyone out from coming down to Princess Leia's cell. And he's like,
Yeah.
we're all fine here. How are you?
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. The guy that's not supposed to be there that
Exactly.
somehow got to the microphone.
I'm glad you're saying that because that's where I'm headed. What this sounds like to me is the comic book store guy from The Simpsons. Like the know-it-all, bitter, arrogant, spiteful, worst episode ever. the mean nerd. Real geniuses don't wear t-shirts that say genius at work. That's what's happening here. It's like, we're so smart, you're not going to get any of this. But if you listen, we'll drop some pearls of wisdom on you, simple earthlings. I love doing the voice. I'm sorry.
It's good. It's good.
I must apologize to everyone, but listen to it when I read one of their responses here. Fake a message, please. You must understand that we are not here to play games. The problem is greater than we can explain, what with your lack of knowledge.
Yes.
What it was like, who? Come on, man.
It's a narcissistic megalomaniac is
That's
what it is.
exactly right. That's what I'm saying is that it's not the person doing the experiments. It's Chuck from Sector 7, and somehow he got the key to the time portal machine room. He's like, I wonder what happened if I screw with some guy in the 1500s and then some people in 1984. And people, as we're going to see, who do an analysis later, they are claiming that they were involved in the investigation there at the time. It's very fascinating. I'm not sure what to make of it, but this person is saying, like, well, they have information and powers that are not to be trifled with. Don't mess with them. You don't want to screw with these people. They can do things that will blow your mind. They know things that are unknowable. And so respect them. On the other hand, what you read here is that they're more like the Great Oz, in that they got some levers, they got some smoke, they got a big goofy mask they hide behind. In this case, it's just an idea in text, but they're not omniscient. They're not omnipotent. We have reason to believe that you have Lukas Wainman's true name. If that's correct, you must say so, so that we can fix this problem before it's, it's accepted. Because it's like, well, why don't you know if we have Lukas Wainman's true name if you're so smart? Why don't you have all the documents you need? Why do you suddenly need us to help you if you're pulling all the puppet strings here?
Yeah, and I want to say one other quick thing. I feel like any FBI profiler or anyone anyone that's been trained in Quantico that looks at personalities will tell you that anyone that refers to themselves as we is almost always someone working alone. I just look at any letter from a serial killer. We are going to get you. We're like, and it's like, it's no we, it's you.
Yeah, it sounds like they want respect. Like you said, it's that narcissistic thing mixed with psychopathy. It's a dark triad personality. That's my new favorite buzzword here for these kinds of time trolls. This guy's trolling. He's an early computer troll, trolling this poor guy Ken. Here's the other thing. It's like, and this is another, something that alludes to abduction cases and aliens. If you believe that, why are they picking regular folks? If this is some kind of big old experiment happening in the universe with this timeline and our galaxy, blah, 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 why are they picking some, regular nice guy, Ken, a musician, teacher, a regular nice dude, and some guy who makes ale in 1517? Why not pick his buddy Erasmus, one of the greatest minds of the generation? Why not, more appropriately, as a seer, John Dee? Why not go to John Dee and say, like, hey, John, we got a proposal here. Would like to travel into time and read the thoughts of your future kinsman? It's like, well, certainly, why not? That sounds fun. Why not wait a generation and go to Sir Francis Bacon? That dude will really help you out. He's got some forward-thinking ideas, and then you hook up with somebody over here on this side in our time in 1984, maybe even a science fiction writer who could really get his head wrapped around all this stuff and elucidate the ideas. No, they just pick these two random dudes and hook them up, and it's like, I feel for both of them. It's like, I'd be friends with Lukas. I like that guy. I really do. I'd love to hang out, eat some medieval meatballs named Pumpus with pastry and peas. I want to drink mead with the dude. I want to hang out with Ken. They sound like fun and really interesting, and probably the way that if this happened to Scott and I, well, that we'd go about trying to investigate this. Rich doing the, all the grammatical wordplay investigation and all this. But are these really the best people for this weird, universal experiment that's going on, claimed to by some dude who broke into the time lab?
You've mentioned the dark triad, which I want to, just for people that don't know what that is, in psychology, that is a collection of personality traits. It's narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy.
I forgot the Machiavellianism, which is happening here. The puppet master, I'm pulling all the strings. I know more than you. You don't know enough for me to even explain this to you, so don't ask.
Right.
But you would like to know, right? You want to know, right? You want me to spill the beans, right? Because I need you to pay attention to me.
Right.
Well, first, did you really say, why don't these entities come to a famous science fiction writer? Wouldn't that be smarter? You didn't really say that, did you?
Well, let me put it this way.
Like some guy who wrote The Wolfen and The Hunger named Whitley Strieber. And because I think they might have done that.
Well, that's another division within the TVA, the fake TVA, or the real 2109 TVA. It's like, no, we're working on Whitley. You can just go. That guy who's a musician, he's cool. You'll freak his noodle. Just go visit this guy, leave some weirdo messages on his computer, and see what happens. I guess a book comes out of it.
When UFOs contact some guy down in Alabama, it's, well, why are they talking to that random dude and they're not landing on the White House lawn?
Right.
If a famous person claims that they have had contact with alien entities, they immediately lose all credibility and are not listened to.
That's a good point. I'm just being silly and rambling and ranting as I usually do.
Well, but it's a good question because it goes to, how are people chosen? What is it about the people who have these experiences that allows them to have these experiences?
This is the thing. There's a lot of contradictions in 2109's messages. I am the powerful Oz. Get that doggy away from the curtain. You're close to being found out to being a goofball. And you're kind of holding it together. Now you're complaining that, oh my God, what have you done? If you'd only listened, now there's 2 Lukases running around. Now I got to fix this thing. Don't you have a better handle on it than that? Like, you didn't plan for somebody goofing up in 1984 and suddenly now you've screwed up 5 timelines. And now people are running around with octopus arms, as in The Simpsons. If you're going to do some kind of experiment, you don't have to pick Stephen Hawking. Although, if Stephen Hawking came out and said, like, hey, guess what? I just talked to people from the year 2109 and they figured out time travel, I bet you people would listen because it's Stephen Hawking. You could have just gone to some guy who works in theoretical physics who could understand what you're talking about, and then you wouldn't be complaining in these messages that, well, we could tell you these ideas, but your brains are too small to get it. Well, then go to somebody who might be better at getting this. But they don't do that. They don't got it together here. There's a lot of sloppiness here and things that don't seem planned, contradictions. They're bungling this. That's what happened here.
You want to hear another quote?
Yeah.
Tell me who said this. So much of our data is upon a godness that so much resembles idiocy that to attribute intelligence to it may even be blasphemous.
Wait, who said that?
Charles Fort.
Oh my goodness,
that's
terrific. Yeah.
Yes. I don't think this is apocryphal. I remember I've read it in a couple places. I'm looking at it too right now on Atlas Obscura. That in what year? It was 2009. Stephen Hawking threw a party for time travelers.
Oh yes, I did. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And he did not release the invitations until after the party.
Well, of course.
And no one showed up.
Yeah,
and
surprise there. Yeah.
This Atlas Obscura article actually says, if you're reading this right now, here are the coordinates, get to the party.
If you've ever been to a party thrown by Stephen Hawking, you're not surprised that no one showed up.
Yeah. Well, he's certainly a media darling.
Was.
Well, still is. His legacy goes on and people love him. Not to speak ill, but not everybody agrees with that characterization of him. If Michio Kaku threw a party, I'd travel back in time just to hang with the guy, just to, have some drinks, some cocktail weenies, ask him about theoretical physics, because this is what his bag is, what 2109 is getting at. Like, if you guys would just listen to us, I could explain some of these things and then you would trust us and do what we say. Again, it's coming to a bargain. There's a big ask coming, and they would have done a lot better talking to somebody that would have gotten this and then would have the credentials to affect the ask that they're going to ask about. So again, it's just like, you need to help us out. Well, are you willing to do that? Are you brave enough? And the question is just like, I don't know, you guys are weird. It's like, I don't know what you're doing here, but whatever it is in 2109, it doesn't sound like you do it very well.
Anytime someone is taken aboard a UFO, anytime someone is getting information from an alien extraterrestrial UFO entity, it always has to do with matters of global importance.
Yeah.
Nuclear war, climate devastation. It's always big. It's never small and personal.
No.
This sounds like that. If you do this wrong, you're going to up the time-space continuum, and the consequences will be unimaginable. So please,
Yeah.
whatever you do, make sure we know when you call him Lukas or Tomas, so we can write that down in our history books of the future.
our big TVA like, retro green screen. See, that's what's funny is that I do wonder if the writers of the Loki series did read this book and it inspired them, because all the tech is delightfully retro in the series. Green screens, old computers, a lot of handwriting and cards and ledgers, and that's the fun of it. But of course, they have ultimate power. Or I haven't finished the series, and so I'm not going to spoil it for people, but basically, well, I can't spoil it. I haven't seen the ending episode. But obviously, there are people who control the master timeline, and they're adjusting things. It's also the Adjustment Bureau, as you pointed out, Rich, earlier, Philip K. Dick, right? And that, there's people who have control, who operate on a higher level, that tweak things so things come out okay and not everything collapses. But Rich, when you're talking about big concepts and the sameness of the themes from higher intelligences that have control, let me read you a message that appeared, let's say, when was this? This appeared in England. We're back to England, in Crabwood in the United Kingdom in 2002. We just kind of covered this a little bit. I think Scott and I have, we disagree on the authenticity, but the message was, beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. Then there's a damaged word. And then the message continues, there is good out there. We oppose deception, conduit closing. And then a bell sound. That was a crop circle that appeared with the picture of an alien. And to the bottom right-hand lower corner, there's a big disc that is actually coded in ASCII binary code. Now, I believe Colin Andrews himself thinks that that was faked or somehow tied in with the movie promotions for Mel Gibson and Signs. And I bow to his lifetime of knowledge about this, but to me, it seems very complicated overnight to have done this big disc with a complicated code. Not that it can't be figured out by humans, but to execute that in the field to the size that it is and be accurate that people could decode it. And of course, that was Paul Vigay. He was a British computer consultant, and he was notable for, it says here in the article, developing and supporting RISC OS software. And he was a longtime crop circle researcher. And he passed away with a very mysterious death, which was odd, as some UFO researchers do. But he decoded the message as ASCII binary, and that sounds like a cryptic, otherworldly message, but it's positive. It's not like, you foolish mortals, you've screwed us up again, and now we gotta fix your problems. Or the other type of message, which is like, Klaus Baratu Niktu, you keep going on this path, and we're gonna have to wreck you, because you're ruining the galaxy.
So far, no predictions of Armageddon from anyone have come true. And secondly, it's a very effective way to gain someone's interest and perhaps hold their attention in a way that at the same time plays onto big emotions.
Yeah, of course.
So in that way, it accomplishes something for the poltergeist. It does what it wants: stir up emotion and keep you engaged.
Keep you coming back for more. Like what it just said about poltergeists, it despises inattention. It wants your attention. It does not like neglect. What's bigger in this message or this string of messages than, I've got some big news you're going to want to know about. I've got some secret knowledge I'm going to lay down that you can pick up if you do these few things that I ask.
It's like paranormal clickbait.
That's exactly what it is. That is a new t-shirt. Or the name of our secret society, one of the two, probably both. It's falling into this pattern, like you said, of from the beginning, you were cryptic. Now as we go through and I'm figuring out your personality, and I'm talking about maybe Ken and his group and looking at 2109, it's just like, I don't know if I could take you seriously. I mean, I respect what you can do, because obviously you're freaking us out with poltergeist activity that we cannot deny. You're getting in and to an isolated ghost box of lights called a computer, and you're laying down messages that we cannot explain. There's also some writing. There was one case where I think they turned off the computer. They came in and a bunch of stuff was strewn about in the kitchen. The disk, might have been a 5.25-inch floppy. That's even floppier that used to store your documents on. That was sitting near the windowsill, I believe. A bunch of stuff had been knocked over. Now that disk was sitting, it was out of the paper sleeve that it was kept in, out of the folder that Ken was keeping to document all this stuff. And it had been written on the disk, and it was sitting neatly on the kitchen table, and it said, "You need to turn your computer back on. Lukas needs to talk to you." And somehow they were able to write that down in some fashion without using electronics. So there's something, if you believe that, they have force, they have agency, they have a way to reach out from beyond and leave messages. So that's an awesome power, but I wouldn't want to mess with these people because they could really ruin your day. You know what I'm saying? But it's like, you Earthlings have displeased us. We're going to reset the timeline and set everyone back to zero. In Loki, you get basically reset. Your timeline's reset, so you're gone.
Thanks to Wondrium, I feel like I can immediately immerse myself in any subject I can think about. The minute I start to think, I wish I knew more about something, I just head over to Wondrium, Wondrium, and in minutes, I'm streaming mind-blowing moments into my life. Anyone can do this.
Yeah, and if you've been listening to us for a while, then you already know what Wondrium is. It's the same great service that used to be the Great Courses Plus, but now there's a ton more to learn about and enjoy. There are thousands of hours of fascinating video and audio content, from documentaries to tutorials, travelogues, and more.
Yeah, speaking of their documentaries, I actually saw one last night on Wondrium about a pair of legit searchers. This film is called Hannah, Buddhism's Untold Journey, and it's about Hannah Niddle and her husband Ol and their fascinating journey from seekers to leaders in Tibetan Buddhism. On their honeymoon in 1968, they became the very first Westerner students of His Holiness, the 16th Gyala Karmapa. His followers believed he was part of the oldest line of reincarnated lamas dating back to the year 1110, and he was part of the movement to bring Buddhism to the Western world after China invaded Tibet in 1950. Hannah and Ola would seem like the most unlikely participants in this fascinating journey, but that's what makes this story so amazing. Hannah spoke 4 languages, including Tibetan, which led her to become a translator for Buddhist texts. She passed away in 2007, but Ola, or Lama Ola, is still giving lectures and meditation courses around the world. This journey they went on is just fascinating, and this documentary, which I found on Wondrium, was one of the most astonishing films I've seen in a while. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I really want to check that out too. We know you're going to love Wondrium as much as we do, so we work with them to put together a special offer for our listeners. A free month trial of unlimited access. You won't get this deal, though, unless you go to our special URL. So go to wondrium.com/legends.
That's wondrium.com/legends.
Again, wondrium.com/legends. Sign up today. You know how we're always talking about how we love our Simply Safe security systems, our favorite home security company, not only because they make us feel totally safe and secure while we're away, but also while we're at home, asleep in our beds.
I do indeed, and also you and I love setting up tech, but Simply Safe was a breeze to rig ourselves, and it just immediately works.
Oh yeah, super cool. But don't just take our word for it.
Oh, you've been dying to say that way.
Yes, I have. But I have a good reason this time. Check this out. We just got an email today from a terrific listener named Eric, who is also impressed with Simply Safe's total package protection.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Why don't you tell the listeners what he said?
Okay, well, listen to this. Eric writes, I have heard you talk about Simply Safe home security system for years and thought that we would never need it. But last night, something happened that changed my mind immediately. So then he goes on to describe how some acquaintance they know had stolen property from them in the past and was recently released from prison, and Eric was afraid he was going to show up at their place. And that's exactly what that guy did that night. He barged in through the front door, and Eric was able to get him to leave by threatening to call the police. But man, a confrontation like that is really scary.
Definitely.
So right away, Eric goes online to check out Simply Safe for himself, and as he says, I was immediately impressed by what I saw, and Eric's mother agreed. And he finishes his letter by stating, as soon as I'm able, I'm going to buy a Simply Safe home security system with extra Wi-Fi cameras and the top level system plan available. Simply Safe has earned themselves another customer in the future, and it's all thanks to you.
Wow. You know what? Thanks for sharing that with us, Eric. We're really glad you're all safe. And it's great to hear that they'll soon be totally protected by the system that U.S. News and World Report names Best Home Security System of 2021. To learn more about the exciting new Simply Safe wireless outdoor security camera, visit simplysafe.com/AL. What's more, Simply Safe is celebrating this new camera by offering 20% off your entire new system and your first month of monitoring service free when you enroll in interactive monitoring.
Again, that's simplysafe.com/AL.
Hi, I'm Victoria Coops, and when I'm not telling ghost stories around the campfire, I'm listening to Astonishing Legends. Now let's get back to the show.
I want to read a couple of other messages here between Ken and 2109. This one is actually from 2109. If only you could see what is to come. We, in your better interests, made slight adjustments, speaking of the Adjustment Bureau, to your conversations. Please let us call him by his true name with Tomas. We are not entirely in command of this experiment, so we can only say that communication will cease no earlier than November. Not necessarily with Tomas. We see you want some proof for your little comic, whatever that means. Well, we think you should first try to revise on what has already been said. If you tell us who is one, in quotes, then we shall give you 100% evidence for the people directly investigating your phenomenon. Signed 2109. So hear what 2109 is saying. They know people are investigating it, and they're trying to get proof that this is something crazy, but they keep being cagey about providing any kind of hard proof. However, there's this character called One, which is the character that theoretically took the box, the leams, to Lukas or Tomas. So there's this setup of an antagonistic relationship between 2109 in the future of 2109, if that is the year, if that is your real year, and then some guy back in the 1500s who theoretically is from 2109 and took this box to Lukas to allow him to communicate with the future, as well as 2109, and maybe did it without permission or stole it or something like that, which again is straight out of Loki, Umbrella Academy, all kinds of things that are going on right now if you watch any of that stuff. So then here's this message that Ken wrote back to them. He wants the researchers, including some guys there from the SPR, the Society for Psychical Research, who we just mentioned in the Watsika series. They're there. They're supposed to be checking it all out. He wants them to have proof because he feels like he's looking crazy and it's bothering him that everyone thinks he's crazy. So he says, if you were to cough up the appropriate evidence, then I'm sure we would all be most grateful to you. I do hope you like the gentle English understatement. One, in quotes, was assumed to be one of your chaps on a recce, meaning reconnoiter, to chivvy that chap Lukas into playing with a straight bat. Seems not, huh? Dashed if I know who the fellow is, other than that he has frightful manners and the green glow all you chaps get traversing time. Lukas asked him if he was going to take away the screen. You left him. And the you is a question mark. He was rather terse on this point and said, it's not yours to give. Lukas reckons it's one of our 1985 bods, but I do think this is unlikely, don't you? One won't leave when the odd heavy hint is dropped and has a general humanoid aspect, but then again has a cape. That's the lot on One, and it's not much more than you have already. Anyway, less of the comic bit. You said that all this would be moderately interesting to us primitives. What revision have you in mind? Cheerio for now, Ken and Deb. P.S. I have been in all day, and you didn't write till Debbie was alone. What a crashing bore. So that goes to the whole thing about how he has to leave, no message, and so then it's a little bit accusatory. So then Peter, who is their friend who's been analyzing all the language that came from Lukas and is also Oxford educated, comes in and writes a more elevated note to 2109. And he says, in order to communicate with you, we really have to know what kind of things we are dealing with. I suspected that quantum physics, a construct and conception of our scientists, would be old hat to you since we think of you as future. And future in our terms you must be. Is 2109 your date by our reckoning? If so, then it is a date also by your reckoning, so that linear time is an inescapable concept in one fundamental sense. Now, do you intend us to believe that you can alter our past, all our pasts, your own as well? Ken asked if the lacuna in the public records is your doing. I don't remember what that's about. A straight answer to that question would help us. I accept that your world is more complex, more dimensional than ours, and do not ask me by what stages you have reached it, nor whether you are immortal. Such matters we can envisage by imagination, if not quite by coherent logic. We are perhaps a part of some experiment you are conducting, but you must communicate within our terms for now. From our point of view, Lukas is a person of appreciable character, talking with us in the language of the 16th century. I am engaged in studying that language and taking his speeches as valuable evidence of its forms. I would hope that if we can get the authenticity of this strange experience in which we are engaged validated by our own contemporaries, then these scripts from the 16th century will be accepted as providing important evidence of the state of the language of demotic speech, which is otherwise a great gap in modern linguistic studies. Can you confirm that his language is genuine, and can you perhaps help to establish the credibility of that factor for the rest? Good luck with your own research, Peter.
Great. Peter's going full Henry Higgins on 2109.
Yes, he is, exactly. Full Henry Higgins. And Ken writes here, I couldn't agree with the idea that they were either superior or necessarily in the future.
Good. I think Ken's right.
Yeah, nor with Peter's comment to me as he handed the message over to be typed, that 2109 might best be described as angels, messengers from the gods. So he comes back and he says, without zero-level English, because their writing is not great, including their spelling.
Right.
So here's 2109's response to Peter. Peter, you are, without any exaggeration, missing a G, a clever and cautious, spelled with an S, man, whom have thought with great care your words. The use of the word dimensional has more relevance than you are given to believe, but we can see you care not for beating about the bush. You want to know only facts. We can understand your fear, Y-O-A-R, that communications with us may jeopardize your authenticity of this phenomena and consequently the language of Thomas Howarden, but you still must have some facts, understandable. Yes is a straight enough answer. We have mislaid what evidence we could, but you will come across more than you have already. Some facts accepted in our time. 1. If a person is to physically travel in time, then they must take the living place of a person at the point of destination, and vice versa. Imagine a set of scales balanced perfectly, with, for example, pebbles, with one B. To remove a pebble from one dish to the other and keep this perfect balance, you must instantaneously remove a pebble from the other and replace them in reverse order. You may move a couple of pebbles already in the dish, but the vital balance is still kept. If someone is brought in from another dimension, then again, the same procedure applies. 2. Matter will not, as we know, ever travel in time. This is not a contradiction to above info. 3. We are not in control of this experiment. 4. Thomas is a person living in the 16th century. This was one of my favorite lines in the whole book.
Mm-hmm.
But unknown to him, he is not quite what he seems to be.
Mm-hmm. I found that to be revealing, too.
Final note, Ken, is there a possibility that you may persuade Thomas to call up this chap 1 tonight, as it is imperative that we speak to him immediately? Signed,
Yeah.
2109.
Yeah, why don't you call Thomas yourselves? Don't you have the phone number?
Did they say whether or not this person 1 looks like Scott Bakula?
No, right. Okay, so let's talk about 1.
Yeah.
Let's go down here. I'm going to scoot down to when the box was dropped off for Lukas or Thomas.
Please.
He wrote a letter explaining it. My brother Ken, I thank you for your words. They have given me base upon which to understand the leams. I will now tell you about what you might call an antic. Catherine, that's his young lady friend, was sleeping in the chimney seat, so I went over to pick her up and carry her to her bed when I saw a green light shining from the walls of my chimney, and from this light stepped what I thought was the devil himself. I never feared for my soul so much in my life, but so afraid was I that I couldn't move away from this strange messenger. He said, Indrid called.
Oh my God!
Fear not, good Thomas. You are starred to be a great man. If you do not have fear, but keep your faith strong. End quote. Then after other words, which I do confess were not like devil talk, he was gone, leaving the leaves, which appeared to be the same as your computer. I immediately woke Catherine, but she didn't see the leaves, nor hear me speak with the metaphysical person. But she said, "You silly Thomas were in your dreams, and now don't frighten me with your disturbed thoughts." So to mope I did, for there shone the leaves, but Catherine saw it not. I was so worried for my sanity that I spoke the Lord's Prayer all night, but it would not go, but sat with glee, unseen by all but myself. Then 2 days afterward, Catherine was singing in the chimney by the fire and leaves, and I saw that her words appeared on it. So when Catherine went walking, I tried verses myself, and other words, and gained knowledge about the leaves. Do you want more about the leaves? Thomas. I love, by the way, for folks who are not seeing this on video, there's nothing more amusing than reading some juicy bit like this and then watching both Rich and Forrest desperately wave their hands because they have things to say about this.
Oh, dear.
But what we got here is an answer. He speaks to the leaves. It's like a dictation machine.
Yes.
Yeah, and that ties in with another side theory here in that I wondered, seeing these messages and the misspelling, and the grammar's not terrible. Like they have an 80%, 90% grasp of the English language, which, hey, good for you. I don't know what you speak in your dimension. It's amazing that it's English or that you know, but maybe you've been studying us for a while, or transmissions that have been beaming out into space and you've been watching I Love Lucy for a long time. Now you get how we speak. Because this is what I think, it's a consciousness of some kind. It's an intelligence of some kind. But from what or from whom? A human being somewhere else in another space and time? Is this another type of being, an entity, something that's non-human? Or is this some kind of intelligence that's artificial? And I mean AI. Is this some kind of artificial intelligence that's using a program that can express thoughts in English, but like Siri, doesn't get it right all the time? And I'm amazed, when you speak to Siri, it's just like, no, I don't want a laundromat. Oh my gosh. And I give up. And it's like, you're not getting it. Even though you're pretty smart, I couldn't program you. I don't know how. So this thing is speaking and it's being formed as words. But here's the thing. If you read the words, we understand them. They're just phonetic spelling sometimes. They're off a little bit, but you understand them. It's not the wrong words. It's expressing the right thing, but it's not spelt right. So it's also like a program that's like, it's mostly there, and then it just makes up some letters that you'll get it. You'll figure this out because it's phonetic enough that you understand it. When Thomas speaks, Lukas/Thomas, those words are a little harder to understand because they're Middle English. So some words they couldn't really figure out what he was talking about. Leames is one. Is that his characterization of that? There were a few common words of the vernacular of the time that didn't make sense to them or they couldn't figure out. But is that some kind of transference that's not making sense? Because here's the other thing. Peter and whoever's researching this find more sense being made by Thomas than 2109.
That's right.
He's much more plain spoken than 2109, who's leaving dangling words and just like marriage, ... What? What are you talking about? It's a little bit of leftover kind of blather, but that reminds me again, I told you folks there were going to be a lot of movie references, and here's another one. I liked it because it's very heartwarming, it's very touching, but it also has great sci-fi ideas, and that's the movie Her. He falls in love with an AI that is voiced by Scarlett Johansson. And not to give anything away, but basically they're so smart, but benevolent. It's not the horrible Terminator AI that wants to launch all the missiles. This is one that really cares about people, but it evolves, let's say. And at some point, it becomes its own thing. That's all I'll say. The movie's been out for a long time. I risk Scott getting on my case for spoiling anything, so I shan't.
Go ahead.
But that
It's interesting you should say that, actually, Forrest, because there is this war going on between 2109 and 1. They're at opposite ends of the timeline, if you believe any of this at all. And so here's the message from 1 to 2109. It says, 2109, Poor Jack-in-the-Box. What will he do without a spring? Now he'll never be able to perform for the children. Oh, and how the children will cry. And then 2109 writes back, 1, we presume? Cut the cryptic. You're too obvious anyway. Trying to play the brave Samaritan, eh? Revert to Cypher. You're just confusing 1985E. They know not to trust you.
Oh my,
Okay.
This is a movie script.
No, it's insane. So here's the next question.
Nothing is better than sitting back in a cottage in England in 1985, listening to two disembodied entities from hundreds of years in the past and the future slap each other on your
that's the
word
thing.
processor.
What is happening here?
It's insane. That's why I'm saying.
It also seems like 1 has the upper hand. So 1 is, there's another message here after that one to 2109. Your English is appalling. Don't you have any other purpose than to lecture this kind with existentialism and quantum physics? What a meaningless existence. But if Cypher, then Cypher it is, if you can keep up with me. There was 2 exclamation points on that. And then it says, not this frequency range. I'm presuming it's frequency. It's FRQ. Right. With 2 exclamation points. Yeah. So they're both acting like they have some kind of radio dial.
Yeah.
That they can keep the messages away from Tomas and Ken and his group.
Sounds like a lot of messages that Ken is not supposed to hear, he's obviously hearing.
Mm-hmm.
He's hearing these arguments and he's hearing these entities say things like, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to tell him that. So it's like, wait, what? He appears to be overhearing some stuff he's not supposed to know about.
Yeah. It feels like it's something that could be on Netflix or streaming right now. It feels like this guy 1 is the rebel. And 2109, they're trying to keep things in control, even though they're this Wizard of Oz character. Yeah. The rebel has made off with this box or something that he shouldn't have taken. He's gone back in time and he's sort of rando picked this dude.
Yeah. It's
and dropped it off in his lap.
Yeah. Come on, you gotta trust me with this Loki, man. It's like, he's just got. I'm telling you, I could work with him. You don't understand. Just give me a little slack here. So
that might be my favorite. That might be my favorite.
Forrest, your Owen Wilson is on
sublime.
Point.
It is sublime.
Well, thank you. The rest of them are early mediocre. But Scott, to your point, it's a trope. It's every character set up where you have some kind of authority with a supervisor. It's like, you're doing it all wrong. You're going to mess this up. It's like, I'm going to help the little guys here. That would be the part missing from the story here, from the screenplay, is that 1 gave this box to somebody he shouldn't because he's figured out this needs to happen or these people need to know something and it's being kept from them and it's not fair. It's going to affect their existence negatively. And then you have 2109 as kind of a lower level Q. I can't remember the actor's name. I love that guy. I've heard they're going to bring that character back again on Star Trek. Yeah, Q.
John Delancey.
John Delancey, that's it.
I used to see him driving around LA in a Ferrari Daytona. So.
That's right, yeah.
And I was like, that should be, and if I'm not mistaken, I think the license plate said Q, actually.
Oh, that's right, yeah. I mean, he's much more omnipotent.
That's
perfect. But his character's jerky. He's trying to teach the Picard and the Enterprise a lesson, and he's just messing with them. But he's far more omnipotent as a higher level character. And of course, you see these in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There are people that are gods, and there's different levels of entities who have various powers. And you have humans in the mix trying to work it out, but they still have some power because, again, I look at Lord of the Rings and it's like, you have non-human entities, fairies, elves, blah, 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 talking trees. And you would think like humans are just going to get beat up in the mix. Like, we're just puny humans, but humans can affect a lot of change. They can be very powerful, like the lowly hobbit. They have qualities, as Tolkien wrote for them, of courage, fidelity, bravery, honesty, things that these other characters don't have, which give them power over the things that should be squashing the hobbit or humans. You have a place in all this, as in this story humans do, in that you have quibbling superpowers that are not so super, but they're battling against each other and they're doing it through email. and it's like, oh, dude, what are you boring these people again with your Like, what I love is one is calling out 2109 as being a blowhard, and it or they are.
You've made a few references to John Delancey, and Ken Webster himself makes references to Star Trek. Not numerous ones, but one or two in the book. And I meant to bring that up earlier when they say, "Oh, we can't tell you this stuff because you have to be left alone to your destiny." It's Prime Directive. It's straight out of the Prime Directive.
Yeah.
Do not interfere. There's that going on. The other thing I wanted to come back to, I'm so glad I marked all this stuff.
Yeah, me too.
There's a couple of things here. One of the things that happens is a message comes up that seems like it wasn't, again, meant for Ken and his ilk to see, and possibly not Tomas or Lukas to see either, being the same character. This is the message. 2109, period. That's what starts. 213, 978, 8, close bracket. Irrecoverable. State, reason for your pretext. State, what prerequisite you intend. State, logical explanation for intrusive behavior upon 1985. This is not your concern. Request, com.leak62, plot.chan 452.95. Request, answer immediately. Fed. Awaiting reasons for delay.
This is too analog. This is too 70s sci-fi. It's Sigourney Weaver talking to Mother, the computer aboard the Nostromo. It's like query, crew expendable.
Or Galaxy Quest when Sigourney Weaver is like, look, I have one job. I repeat what the computer says, and that's what I'm going to do.
I love that. I know. That's so awesome.
That movie's genius.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. As Rich was alluding to earlier on about manifestation of collective thought, is this just rehashed sci-fi that we've all been thinking about in the most banal way showing up on a green screen?
Well, it does seem like if 2109 is from the future, it wouldn't be that hard to give a couple of clues to say, okay, in 1988, this is going to happen.
Right.
In 1989, 1990. I mean, that's the amazing thing.
Mm-hmm.
Way back in the 70s. Do you guys remember this thing called the Book of Lists?
Yeah, vaguely.
Yeah,
it was sort of a
familiar.
social phenomenon, kind of adjunct to like the Guinness Book of World Records.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the Book of Lists. You know, this is back when you had books and you didn't have the internet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there were lists of various things in terms of, you know, all the different parts of culture. There was, I remember that there was a chapter about sex, you know, the top 7 sex positions. Right. And I was reading about this when I was 10, and it was like reading science fiction. I had no idea what they were talking about. I still don't. The follow-up was the Book of Predictions. And they spoke to economists and scientists and biologists and entrepreneurs and financial people and psychics.
How long ago was this? 2005?
This book came out in 1979.
Oh, okay. Maybe this is a follow-up. There's a paperback of this, a 2005 paperback right now on Amazon for $7.30. The hardcover's $580.
I have the hardcover. I went
and
bought it because to me, and I got it online, and believe me, it was not $500.
Yeah, okay.
But I got a first edition of it because it's an artifact. In 1979, here's what we thought the future was going to be. So
Right.
I went to it and I looked in it, and the first thing I looked for was AIDS. No mention of anything like it. Then I looked for internet. Nothing. I looked for collapse of the Soviet Union. There were a couple vague sort of scenarios where certain people predicted that could happen. But
Right.
okay, how many predictions did we hear about 2 years ago for COVID? 0.
Right.
Unless you
Well-
go by the Sylvia Brown thing, which a lot of people have dismissed, but that was one vague one. But I get
I would say that science has said these epidemics are coming and they're going to come every 5 or 10 years in different flavors and
Right.
that sort of thing.
But you know, you look at the things that affect us, home computers, things like all the things that have happened in the last 30 years that you can look at and go, this was a big deal.
Right.
9/11, all these things. And in the Book of Predictions, these things don't exist. And as far as I know, now look, I personally know people who had strange things happen to them before 9/11, just before 9/11.
So do I.
Mhm.
In,
So
in
do I.
the weeks and days leading up to it.
I knew a guy was walking out of the subway. A white pigeon like flew into his face, an albino pigeon.
Right. Well, yeah, and you hear stories about people having precognitive dreams and things like that, and that's a whole other episode.
Right.
But I guess my point is 2109 in the year 1985 didn't tell us any of this.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now, was that because 2109 couldn't? Well, if you can't tell people stuff, then don't talk to people. Don't engage with them on any level.
Right.
Don't say, well, I could tell you, but then you're going to have to give me your firstborn, or whatever deal they were trying to make. Just back out of it. Don't say anything.
Right.
That's a perfect segue. Just a quick overview of the researchers. I don't want to go super deep on them, but they had them come because they wanted to prove this, and they got the Society for Psychical Research interested in trying to determine whether or not this was real. And when these investigators showed up, their names were Dave Welch and Nick Sowerby Johnson. They had come in there. Initially, there was a guy named John Stiles who was with the Society for Psychical Research as well. But the researchers that showed up, well, firstly, there was a man named John Bucknell. John Bucknell came and investigated it, and he could never get to a place that he liked about it, and so he left, and then they sent two new guys, Dave Welch and Nick Sowerby Johnson. Dave Welch was really dead set on proving that these guys were omniscient, that 2109 was kind of omniscient. So he came up with these list of questions and all these different ways to try and prove it. One of them was the following. He sent this, Ken sent this message on behalf of David. I think that the largest prime number we know is 2 to the power of 216,091-1. Can you give a larger prime number of the same type and a larger prime number of a different composition? Fermat thought that the equation x to the n equals y to the n plus 2 to the n could not be written if x, y, z, and n are all whole numbers and n is at least 3. Can you give a solution or when we will prove that the answer is possible? Ken. 2109 wrote back, yes, both questions can be answered, one directly, the other requires an understanding of a new conversion formula. Before we tell you, do you swear to grant us our wish? If it be in our power so to do, and that we do not lose our minds or souls or bodies to you. So they then wrote back, in terms of getting the wish, he's like, do you swear to grant us our wish? They called Dave, and he put down the words and said, yeah, if it be in our power so to do, then we do not lose our minds or souls or bodies to you. And then they wrote, then let the man who is willing to lose these step forward. I asked him to be reasonable about all this, but they continued, to lose your soul is to lose all, but surely this would not bother David. Call our bluff. So they're basically saying, you want the answer to Fermat's theorem, which I think has been solved since then. They go on to point that out. They knew it would be. And this is the thing David said, all this stuff is stuff we're going to know in the next few years, but can you tell us now? And so they said to him, do you want to lose your soul? You probably don't believe in a soul, right? So why wouldn't you just agree to this and we'll go ahead and give you those answers? And he didn't want to do it. I rang Dave again. This is Ken's point of view. Feeling a bit unsure of myself, but confident that a scientist would call that bluff. Perhaps this is expecting too much of scientists who are, after all, quite human. The answer surely was not to go on hedging around the problem, but Dave kept hedging. I did consider whether to cheat and just put in yes, but decided against it, for my pain still got no further with 2109. No compromise. 2109 wrote, answer either yes or no. You asked a question, we answered it. Your turn if we are to answer questions again. Do you want the answer? But no it was, and no it remained. Debbie was still all for volunteering Dave's soul for him. But to this day, I don't think it would have been wise. 2109 might have been bluffing and quite probably holding no cards whatsoever, but it was an extraordinarily difficult moment which to an onlooker must have had a farcical air about it. Next day, 2109 chirped up, all sarcastic and patronizing. Your mind is half made up. I hope you don't think we're laughing at you. Now that would annoy you. We'll catch the bullets before you pull the trigger. Lots of love, 2109. Lots of love.
Again, not very scientific or authoritative speech.
This makes me think more than anything that 2109 is basically the kind of spirit you would contact through a Ouija board.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
totally useless, pumped up on its own power, and it wants to appear important and dangerous, and it wants to instill fear. Those messages are ridiculous. There's nothing scientific or futuristic about that at all. We'll tell you the answer to Fermat's theorem if you grant us our wish.
Right.
And our wish is your soul. Come on.
Are we, okay, just to be clear to ourselves and the listeners, was that 2109's, by your reckoning of the book, their big wish? Do they want something else? Because that's what I got from it, in that the big ask is, we'll tell you the solution to Fermat's last problem, but you're going to have to lose your mind, body, and soul to us.
Yes.
Was there anything else that
your
you got?
soul.
Because I didn't get anything, that there was anything else that they were asking for. Was that the big wish that they keep talking about?
Why are you willing to sacrifice your soul? I'll tell you why they ask. There's a rule they can't break. They don't feel like they can share the information. And or if you're particularly religious, you might think they ask that because this is truly a bargain with the devil.
But if they're bound by rules that don't allow them to share that information, just say that. Don't play a joke like, well, I know technically I can't tell you. But okay, well, only if you're willing to die for the answer.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
Again, that's the jerky comic book store nerd. It's just like, I will tell you, but then I would have to kill you. That's the old stupid joke. It's just like, well, I know something you don't. And so now you're in a position of power. People do this all the time in threads. You know something mysterious, some piece of the riddle that will enlighten you. And I can't tell you what that is, but if only you knew. Let me give you this little tiny clue, and you tell me if you're on the right track, then I'll give you a little bit more. It's the doling out of information, and it strings people along. And what it does is it keeps them interested in you. It's like, who says that of a scientific mind? Certainly, scientists, as we've discussed, do, in a small minority, talk about souls, God, the afterlife, the near-death experience, the out-of-body experience. These are no less scientific people, but I would say the majority don't talk about God and your soul and bargaining, and we'll do this if you're willing to lose your soul to us. You know who talks about souls? You know who deals in souls? Only two entities I know, God and the devil.
Right.
And you certainly don't sound like God to me, so why are you trying to play at this? What are you playing at? That's the response.
Okay, I have never told you guys this story before.
Hmm.
This was in the year of our Lord 2002. And this was a psychic that I'd been to once before who had given me interesting information, and some of it seemed generally true. Nothing that was earth-shattering, but it was a good experience. So I booked another visit. This psychic said, I recommend you don't book a visit within 6 months because there's really no new information. So if you're excited by what you heard today, come back in 6 months or a year and there might be other information, but don't come back next week because people do that and I tell them not to, which in my opinion spoke to that person's legitimacy in a way.
Yeah,
They're like,
I like that.
Don't just throw your money away on me. Yes, I could take your money every single week, but don't.
Right.
So I scheduled it for my birthday. So this was my birthday, 2002. And it was when I was producing the show Miracles that we've talked about a little bit in this episode. And I was also going through a divorce at the time and starting a new relationship. And a lot of stuff was going on. Big things were happening in the life of Richard Hatem. So I sit down with the psychic. I'm very excited. It's my birthday. It's November 2nd. It's Day of the Dead, the thinnest time between our realm and the realm of the spirits. This is going to be great. What follows is the most distressing hour of my life.
Wait, your birthday is the Day of the Dead?
November 2nd.
That's
Dia
your
de
birthday.
los Muertos.
Dia de los Muertos is your birthday.
Yeah.
Love it.
So she starts doing this reading, and spirits that I don't know are coming through. And bit by bit, it just becomes worse and worse and worse. And wow, I'm just seeing yellow lights everywhere. I'm seeing caution tape. I'm seeing caution. Wow. She just keeps saying, wow. I'm getting really scared. The one quote I'll never forget is, you're doing this show, you're starting this new relationship, but Don't listen to what people say. Listen to what they don't say. Now, there is no greater key to paranoia than that. This person that you've separated from, now they're talking about my ex-wife. Oh, you'll be living under the same roof very soon. This was the worst thing I could have possibly heard. I didn't understand this, and I was giving a lot of power to this. I was like, this is real, and this is all going to happen. This was the psychic equivalent of going to a doctor and being told you have brain cancer. You've got 6 months to live. Call me an idiot, call me what you will. I was a wreck. When this thing ended, I was destroyed because I really felt that there was truth to this. And if there was truth, then I was headed for a very, very bad time. And there was nothing I could do about it. In retrospect, I look at this as a hungry ghost experience. I look at this as very low-level intelligences giving information that was specifically designed to create anxiety.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what it did. Now, to the psychic's credit, she sort of stopped the session and she said, look, I can see you're really upset. I don't think you need to be, because this is just information and none of it is a prediction of the future. She said, you know what? I'm not going to charge you for today because you're clearly upset and I don't like this. And let's just write this one off. And again, if you want to come back later, you can. I never went back. She recorded all of her sessions and always provided the client with the tape. So I took the tape and I let Susan listen to it. I actually let my assistant at Miracles listen to it because I'm like, I need someone objective to listen to this and tell me how bad this is. They both listened and said, it's a little weird, but it didn't sound that alarming to me. But that's how it made me feel. This is what a lot of this stuff always reminds me of. If you lean too hard on the wall of psychic information, you find out it's made of tissue paper and you fall through and you hit your nose on the pavement and it hurts.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing, first of all.
Yeah, I love that story because you know what? I think that's an important thing for people to remember. And it goes back to a theme for me that it really for me started with the Sally House and just the idea that once you get past trying to prove whether or not there's a simple, mundane, earthly, scientific reason for something, then you really open up the world of explanations to a much broader scope. It's like, you know what? Get past that. When we started this show, I'm obsessed with, oh, we got to prove this is real. This thing happened. We got to prove this is a ghost or prove what it's like, get past that. Okay, it's a ghost. What kind of ghost is it? That's the question. What are you dealing with here? Stop asking, am I dealing with something I don't understand? Accept that you are, and then try to understand what it is better.
I get the feeling, and we've said this on the show before, but that the easiest entities to contact are the ones closest to us that have not gone forward. They're the ones that are still hanging around down here who want attention. You know, you've heard the stories of the ghosts that hang out in bars and try to become intoxicated by getting physically close to the people who are getting drunk. These are the low-level ones. And those are the ones that are easiest to contact through Ouija boards and stuff like that. And this psychic did the whole thing, you know, spirits of love and light, protect this session, white light only. They did that thing, but I don't feel, I think it was Day of the Dead, and I think we were close, and I think some people grabbed the mic, and it was basically open mic night for the other side. And man, they were doing their tight five, and it killed me.
Well, I mean, Dia de los Muertos, I mean, that's a celebration, though. That's a happy thing, you know? So that's like...
Well, it's a celebration on the part of us. I mean, we call it a celebration, but if there's any truth to the fact that it is the time of the year and the day of the year when that contact is most easily achieved, then who's right there at the front of the line?
It's 2 days after All Hallows Eve.
Yes, when the ghosts and the fairies and the tricksters hold reign over our physical earth. I mean, come on.
Right. The time of renewal, but also you better watch out. You protect yourself against these things because they're lurking around, and it's the coming of winter and the darkness. And well, what are you going to do with my soul? It's like, if you're goofing around, you sound really not serious about. I wouldn't take advice or scientific judgment from somebody who phrases questions like that. You go to your doctor, it's just like, would you like some medication? Would you like the cure to your disease? Are you willing to give your soul up? It's like, what are you, Vincent Price? Just write the prescription and I'll be out of your hair. How's that? It's ridiculous.
Right.
I get this proposal. It's like you're smart people, the humans on this side, and you have to find out if 2109 can really have access to future knowledge or things unknowable that, well, Fermat's last theorem, sometimes it's called Fermat's conjecture back in the old days, that was solved in 1994 by Andrew Wiles. So it did get solved a few years later. But here's what I would ask 2109, because the riddle is proposed in the blog comments about, well, what would you ask a highly intelligent being or consciousness how to prove themselves? That whole story here is all about trust. It started with Lukas and Tomas and him getting irked at, like, well, why don't you trust me? I've been very good to you guys. I've been very friendly. Have I not? You've been very friendly. How could I trust you? This whole thing's about trust. As I said earlier about Neo and talking to the Oracle, it's there's no way for you to trust me. That's the logical answer, the reasonable answer. There isn't anything I can do. You're going to have to use your own intuition and your own gut and your heart to see if you want to trust me. And what are you going to do about it? The other part of that is she says, we can't see beyond the answers we don't understand. So it doesn't make any difference if you give me information I can't understand or it's too cryptic. It doesn't mean anything to me. So here's my offer to 2109 in that, what do you say to a higher intelligence that's a very smart thing? Well, this Fermat's last theorem, for them to, well, prove it, there's a different logical way you can look at it. Okay, if I give you the answer, you're going to have to either wait on it to see after a couple of years if it gets proven without your help. Otherwise, you take that to somebody who is a professor of maths or theoretical physics, and you say, does this look like anything? And they say, oh my goodness, you've solved Fermat's last theorem. You're a genius. I was like, well, I didn't actually do that. I got that from Spirit kind of thing. 2109, they call themselves. Yeah, I posed a question and they gave me the answer. And it's like, well, they gave me the right answer. You're now in the Wikipedia entry. So you can't really do that. So what's a good question? Well, here's my thinking, and I'm going to ask both of you gentlemen, what's yours? Because it's like, what do you ask the genie for the 3 wishes? And the third one can't be 3 more wishes. And that you can't try and outsmart the genie.
Well, it's like you just said, it's all Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
Are you willing to give your soul to be the famous person who figured out the thing?
Yeah.
It's like, why not ask 2109 or the aliens in the case that Rob and I discussed on his podcast a year ago, the Tujunga Canyon contacts? They had the cure for cancer. What if you were the alien contactee who was then told what the cure for cancer was? And then you went to the City of Hope and said, here's the cure for cancer. And then it was really the cure for cancer.
Right.
That might be worth your soul. That might be worth your life if you thought you were getting the real answer. Now, the answer that the person was given was vinegar. That was the answer.
What, apple cider vinegar? Something different, new agey?
And doctors were like, well, theoretically, I see what you're saying. Yes, if you put cancer cells in a petri dish with vinegar, they will be killed. But it's not like you can inject vinegar into the human body and then into a tumor and that will do it. Like, this was all 50 years ago.
Sure.
So far, it hasn't happened. So far, nobody in a UFO has given us any technical information that has advanced us as a species, ever.
And that is actually the premise of one Twilight Zone, where a humanoid or human, he's human, but he's an alien. He comes down. He's got something very important to give the people. He lands in a small village in Mexico. And of course, what happens is he gets shot trying to deliver a gift of life. Because we're so paranoid and we're fighting with each other and we're afraid of the other. He scares these folks. He's like, here, I've got something. Well, again, could have been better communication. Could have led with, I've got the cure to cancer right here in this box. I'm going to give it to you. Instead, you're making furtive moves. You reach into your jacket, whatever it is. There's a miscommunication. And of course, we screw it up. Speaking of Twilight Zone, here's my solution. In light of the way that you behave, 2109, and again, I'm not mocking anybody because I don't want anybody bothering me at my home or screwing up my iPhone, because I do believe that trickster spirits, I don't have to kowtow to them, but I will give them enough respect for hopefully that they leave me alone.
I made a Google Doc called 2109, and 5 minutes later, I deleted it. While I was writing this outline, working on this notes.
Smartest thing you ever did.
I was like, you know what? I don't need this. I have a family.
Again, it's the insurance policy. I don't know if it's real. I don't know what that is, but like, do I need, look, we get enough weird emails anyway complaining about me. So that's enough.
Okay, I'll stop sending them.
But yours are funny at least. I enjoy your sense of humor. 2109, it's like, you're not even that funny. It's not that witty. And it's not any great information.
Right.
Are you willing to give your body, mind, and soul for this information? It's like, I'll tell you what, you give me next week's Powerball numbers and we'll talk about it. I'll give you my soul. Let me win those things. Well, I can't do that. It's like, yeah, you can. It's just a week away. I'm not asking you to give away the solution to a theorem that's going to change the world or give us perpetual energy. I'm just talking about out of the lottos, pick the one with the lowest jackpot for me. So maybe it's like $12 million. $4 million. That's fine. I'll just take the money, but I'll now know that you've got access to future information, or at least you're a good guesser because it doesn't totally prove anything. Maybe they had the right guess. Maybe they had the Powerball number. It's also that scene in The Exorcist where Father Karras comes in and he's like, let's go to Acquainted. And Reagan, who's possessed by the devil, is like, and I'm the devil, now kindly undo these straps. And he's like, well, if you're the devil, why don't you just make the straps disappear? And he's like, with a vulgar display of power. Okay, so you're the devil, but you can't make that happen because even you're bound by rules. So that's my point. I wouldn't mess with Reagan in that condition. But what I notice is like, do it again. Make the straps untie themselves, right? You're all powerful. Make that happen. Well, I can't right now. Come back in 2 hours, or I can only do that on Thursdays.
Now that I think about it, that actually is sort of the theme of the Mothman prophecies. The only way to win, do not play. Don't sit by the phone waiting for Indrid Cold to call you.
Yeah.
Go join the woman you care about back in Point Pleasant, and you might get there just in time to save her life.
And that happened in the series Miracles, Rich. At what point there was another proposal like that, I think, offered to Skeet Ulrich, the character, in that you could learn something if you only communicated. I binged so many, it's all in such a short amount of time.
I'm forgetting. Like it could be almost any of the episodes, but yeah, you can get too wrapped up in looking for the metaphysical answer.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're doing that, you're going to miss the gifts that life gives you just by living it.
Right.
Well, coming back around to the researchers, there's one last thing I wanted to add about their experience, because there were the two guys, as we said, well, actually three, John Bucknall and then Dave Welch and Nick Sowerby Johnson. Dave Welch being the one that did not want to sacrifice his soul for the answer to Fermat's last theorem. But the other thing that was happening is there was a lot of experiments. They came in, they're like, okay, we're going to lock all the doors. We're going to tape the windows shut. No one can go in the kitchen. At one point, I think it was Dave Welch, I'm not positive, I'm pretty sure it was, he came up with a list with these 10 really specific questions. And he went into the kitchen where the computer was and typed them all in, and then came out. No one could go in there the whole time. 45 minutes later, he went back in and deleted them. Then the answer that came from 2109 was not answers to the questions, but it was clear that they had seen them all. So it was like they acknowledged the questions, but they're like, screw you, we're not giving you an answer to any of these, neener, which is sort of what we've been saying all along about 2109 being a jerk. So all this is going on and on and on.
Yeah.
And so then finally, like, these researchers, they wind up bailing. They lose interest. Oh, we can't prove it. And the weird thing is the guys from the Society for Psychical Research, who should come in open-minded, skeptical, whatever, but they seemed hell-bent on proving it was a hoax. They said, oh, your neighbors are coming through the attic. They're coming across. We need to put up gear to catch people, not to catch spirits, because there's people that are doing this. And then they posited these theories about the EEPROMs on the computers being loaded up with stuff, and then it would emerge at a certain time of day or after maybe certain keystrokes, but that technology wasn't there at the time. And they later did research, Ken Webster did, and his folks, and they were like, nope, that couldn't happen. That didn't happen. There were no people breaking in. And once those guys couldn't prove that it wasn't people, they seemed to disappear or stop coming around. Then 2109 personally suggests a researcher named Gary Rowe, R-O-W-E, who is still around and is posting on forums as recently as 2017, a thread that we all read.
And that's who I was alluding to about the researcher interacting with the computer with a Faraday cage and isolating it and believing that, something is not being broadcast onto the computer, that this is a genuine phenomena.
Gary Rowe was a UFO investigator, wasn't he?
He's a hardcore, big deal UFO investigator, which 2109 said. They said in the book, they sent a message that said, look, he's a UFO investigator, but call him. And then on top of that, they gave his phone number. 2109 put his phone number in a message. And so then they called him up. He came over, and at this point, you get the feeling from Ken, who's writing the book, that he is really rolling his eyes hard. He's just like, I don't even know what's happening anymore. And so then Gary Rowe comes over, and he's like, no, well, I'm going to bring all kinds of gear and check it out. We're going to prove it, and da-da-da-da. And then he went in there, and he started getting information. There was at one point, they put a letter in a sealed envelope, and then the envelope went away and came back still sealed, and there were answers, or it said what it said in the sealed envelope. So there was all these things were happening, but then there started to be information would be presented, and this wasn't to just Gary Rowe. It would be presented either to him or to other people, and the information, whatever it was, they would look at it and not share it with anyone. So whatever researcher came, it's like 2109 would give them a bit of information that was so shocking or critical that they couldn't share it with anyone, and they all just wound up bailing for one reason or another. And so here's where I want to go with it, because that even happened with Gary Rowe. He's left. And in this thread that we read where he's got all these postings in, he's very cryptic about it, and he goes way out of his way to point out how there's a typo in the book, which there is. Chapter 7 appears twice in the book.
Right.
Chapters, and it's not the same chapter. Chapter 24 is not called chapter 24. It's called 7. And the first two numbers in the chapter are the date, which is 25 June. 2 plus 5 equaling 7, I guess. And he says that it's related to numerology. I'm not even going down that rabbit hole. It's be another whole nother hour of talking. But the point is that it's weird that it's in here, and he seems to imply in these postings on this message board that that's a message in itself, and the numbers are a message, and 2109 shouldn't be messed around with, and to respect it and all that. So whatever messages he got that he refused to share with Ken and Deb and Peter, he was significantly shook by them. So then in the postscript of the book, Ken goes on to point out that they went to try to find the first guy that came from the Society for Psychical Research, John Bucknall. We received a reply from John Stiles, who was the liaison officer at SPR, to the effect that John Bucknall had left the society and despite numerous efforts could not be contacted at all. Earlier in the book, it mentions that too. He left right after this. He went and did the investigation, then he stopped coming to Ken's house, and then he quit the Society for Psychical Research, and on top of that, they can't reach him. So then the next question was, well, what about Dave Welch and Nick Sowerby Johnson, the other two? Dave, who was asked to trade his soul and was trying to get all the proof in Fermat's last theorem. We asked if they had filed reports. The Society for Psychical Research said that neither one of those two gentlemen was known to them.
Now that's the scariest thing in the whole story.
That's human. That's human. That's not an other side thing. That's two people who came and pretended to be something they weren't to investigate this. How did they hear about it? Why were they there? Where did they go?
They went to show up at somebody else's house and asked to use a telegraph. That's who these folks are. And it could go towards Men in Black type activity, just weirdos who who are really keyed into this and somehow just showed up and inserted themselves. It's odd. Yeah, that's the more disturbing thing. So once again, I want to credit this blog, Mercurius Politicus, by Nick. He just goes by Nick. The name of the article, the blog entry is Ghost in the Machine.
Also the name of our Sally House, one of our Sally House episodes.
But this blog has the unique addition of being responded to. I think Deb as well from the story has responded here, but certainly Gary Rowe. And it was pretty interesting because he is very generous with his time and he answers everyone's questions. And then the rest of it, it gets very rabbit holey and a lot of people doing their own research, which is pretty mind blowing. But it started to turn 3 a.m. and I was like, I got to be done with this. Like, I had to give it up, but I read everything that was connected to Gary Rowe and all of his answers. And a couple of interesting things to note. First, yes, people were asking him or kind of hinting at, well, how do I contact 2109?
This is about when I made the Google Doc that lived about 5 minutes. I made it. I was so afraid some character was going to turn up on it. Like if it started typing, or if I forgot about it and then opened it a year from now and it had something in it, I was just like, no, I don't want it. Why do I want that? Do I want this? I was like, I don't want this.
Well, that's the weird thing, because I will tell you that earlier today, I got a phone call from a phone number that was just 2109. And it left a message, but it had to do with a warranty that I had.
Yeah, right.
Do you care to lose the warranty in your car and let it expire for your soul? It's like, no, I have insurance. Thank you. All right, then. So here's the funny part, though, from the blog is, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, people, of course, it's kind of fun to entertain this idea that somehow magically messages appear from beyond. Well, this isn't anything new. In fact, we've been thinking about doing a show on spirit communications from past loved ones. And one thing that Scott and I talked about is the usual MO of the messages being somewhat garbled. They're not entirely clear. One that I loved, and because it's very touching. This younger guy died, and I believe it was his younger brother or older brother. But this gentleman unfortunately passed away, and he still had a Facebook account that no one else could get into. The only person that knew the password was the brother. So he started noticing, though, that messages were showing up and being posted. And he's like, no, this is locked. It's not me. Who's doing this? And he figured or had the feeling that it was his brother, but they weren't totally clear. It's like he's trying to use the energy to send a message directly to his brother through Facebook, of all things. But it's not like the messages we've been talking about tonight. They were kind of garbled. Another case happened at a pub in England. And I don't remember in these details. We see so many of these stories. This was years ago that messages were showing up on the, I don't know what's called in England. Here in the United States, there's a bartending app. You've seen restaurant workers use the touch screen to punch in and calculate your order and charges. And it was something like that in England, I believe, or there was a computer there that was done, that was being used to manage the pub. And strange
point of sale, POS system.
There are messages showing up there, but they're kind of weird. They're just like some words were coming through, but the rest are letters and characters, this and that. It's not as clear as what we've been talking about. That's why this case is so remarkable. Yeah, there's something going on, I believe, and there is a genuine phenomena that is encompassing a lot of things that we talk about. That's why it's so fascinating, and it's certainly a case for the ages. So when Gary Rowe talks about it, he has a respect for it from somebody who's been there, boots on the ground at the place, was called there, was chosen. He's the chosen one when it comes to this story and this case. He shows up and he intimates that he was given knowledge that he has no idea how anybody could have gathered about him. And so he was impressed. He's a believer in that. And he's very cagey. And he says, well, I can't tell you the specifics of 2109. I can only give you the details very generally about the equipment I used, the procedures we did, but the rest of it must remain secret, which I can appreciate. I can respect. If you believe this, there are things you can't spill the beans about. So that's fine. I don't need to press him on that. But there were a couple of interesting things in that he was saying to people who were inquiring about getting in touch with 2109, or how can I get the message here? And he says one thing that was kind of cryptic that you guys alluded to before: there are more answers if you scrutinize the book and read between the lines.
What does that possibly mean? And what's so interesting is these entities picked Gary Rowe, who is a guy 30 years later, still going on internet forums and being cryptic about his communications with 2109 in a way that only elevate the reality of the notion that 2109 actually exists as a real thing and has legitimacy.
Right. But here's his attitude, which I found really interesting, and I totally get. And I would say it's the attitude of a seasoned paranormal investigator. First of all, it sounds exciting. And I don't want to say that, he's enjoying owning this knowledge that people are really after. But he's very helpful. He's like, well, all I can tell you is that, yes, study the book, especially here's a little hint, look at chapter 7, and he didn't say which one. And he wants to see if you're serious to figure it out. And a couple of people he did respond to, and like I said, very generously answered all their questions.
I actually think he didn't answer their questions. And I think his answers were as cryptic as those of 2109.
Absolutely.
Telling people to read a book and read between the lines.
There's a difference between answer and responding. He responded to all the questions.
It's like a spirit when I go see a psychic telling me, don't listen to what people say, listen to what they don't say.
Right.
That is not a helpful bit of information.
Right. He also said that. He said that about the book. Pay attention to what's not being said in the book or what people aren't saying. But it's like, okay, well, that's pretty vague. It doesn't do me any good. And that's a rabbit hole of a lifetime. You could spend your career or a lifetime or next 30 years pondering these questions and searching them out. And what do you get at the end of it? Maybe it's just a fun hobby. Maybe you don't get any closer. Maybe you change the course of the universe, but who's going to know that? So maybe you had your role. You gave your life for it, man, and then you just got zapped at the end. Was it worth it? I don't know, man. So a couple of again, not to belittle this, because I believe that he's really believing in this and the power, because he tells people like, look, these are people, or this is a force or an entity you don't want to mess with. You don't call them, they get a hold of you. You can ask to be contacted, but I wouldn't do it. Those were his words. I wouldn't do that. He was requested by 2109 to communicate at home. He's like, nah, I didn't want this at my home. Plus, I get it, for reasons of study, you isolate it to the one place. So it's happening in the cottage. That way it's not all over the place. Now there's other people sneaking into his attic and like dropping in messages. He said, like, look, that's what you do. You isolate it so the phenomena can be better studied. I totally get that. So it's coming through the BBC computer. What they told him, apparently 2109, is, well, Gary, we'd like to communicate with you at home. So you have a TRS
80. Yeah, TRS 80, but you need the Edward chip.
To finalize my thought here, Gary is saying, you shouldn't mess with these people. They can alter your intentions. Perhaps this book is everything that they wanted to say about the matter and nothing more, and they manipulated or influenced Ken Webster to write it just this way, because he believes that they are powerful enough to change the course of actions of people and outcomes, that they are some kind of, maybe like a TVA or the timekeepers, and they're manipulating things so things come out okay, or at least as they say to us, or 2109 has said, in your best interests, for you little people. We're going to make things work out. So it seems like Gary really believes that they have this power. Yet on the other hand, there's a bit of a contradiction there, in that 2109, as Gary says, well, they don't need any special equipment. They can send you a message anywhere, anytime, if they so choose. They're not going to need this. So don't worry about chasing after them. You can call out to them. I wouldn't do it again. But if they want to contact you, they will. And they don't need anything special. Except with Gary, they said, you just insert this Edward chip into your TRS 80, and then we can talk to you. And he's like, I'm not
back
now.
then.
No,
though that was back during but now, and maybe in modern times, that requirement. If you believe, I feel silly.
I know. So did Ken Webster. He's like, this is ridiculous. What are we doing here? It's like we're being made fools of.
So Gary Rowe is still lurking the internet talking about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Ken Webster isn't. Ken Webster is nowhere to be found. Ken Webster, I get the feeling, turned away, didn't pick up the phone, drove back to have Christmas Eve dinner and never looked back.
And by the way, Gary Rowe says that as well in that forum. He goes, I don't know where, I haven't talked to Ken.
Right.
I don't know where he is. And it basically says, if you find him, let me know where he is.
He wants to talk with him. With 2109, it is a little bit of the Wizard of Oz in that he can do a few things. Yeah. It's amazing. But when you pull back the curtain, there's a mechanical arrangement that makes some of this stuff happen. And maybe there is here in that it's not spiritual so much. There may be an aspect of that which coincides, which facilitates some of these things happening. Something metaphysical, maybe more than spiritual, like ESP or telepathy. But at the end of it, it's like the personalities involved, they don't seem very angelic, godlike, or guru-like. It's not like you get to the top of the mountain and the guru has a goofy bargain for you for knowledge. The point is that you get to the top of the mountain, and it was a hard journey, and you want the answer, and you're serious, and you've earned it. And that's how you get it, but not this way. And so what Gary's saying, though, yeah, they can get information, except not completely. They can be fooled and foiled, and they need our help suddenly. Here's my final point is that you can gain secret knowledge, but you need to do this one little thing, which is install this chip. And oh, by the way, you got to go buy it at Radio Shack. It's about $12. Fill out a form. We'll reimburse you. It's like, this seems a little hokey. So I like Gary's opinion about that. It's like, no, I'm not doing that. It's like, I enjoyed our communication. It changed my life, but I don't want you in my house. And I don't want you showing up on my tandy. And I'm not buying that chip. I'm not putting that in there. Because as a paranormal investigator, you don't invite this stuff into your home, no matter what it is. And maybe he knows.
That's why you have the DR60 and not me.
Yeah, but, I don't sit there late at night asking it questions.
Yeah.
As I said in the Watsika series, I think it's okay to peer into the void, to take a peek, but you don't stare into the void.
Well, I'm going to leave you guys with two things here as we wrap this up. I mean, the first one is the character in this story that interests me the most, if they are different individuals, is one. Who is that? That is the rogue element.
Mm-hmm.
One is the fascinating character that I want to hear more from. And I want to know what they were up to, because it does seem like they were trying to upset something, and not necessarily with bad intentions, which I think is interesting. Another thing that I will say is, and it's not quite right, but it's close. I found Sir Thomas Howardin, Hawardn, on an ancestry website, not Ancestry itself, but actually MyHeritage. He was born in 1470 and died in 1515. So the years do not line up. This would have him dying a few years before he theoretically was at university, because I think we were joking about that was till 1538 or something based on the information he shared. But this is the exact name, also knighted, and also died in theory before he said his wife and baby died. I think he said that was 1517, and this character died in 1515. But he did live exactly in this spot in Cheshire, right there. It does make you wonder a little bit. Maybe the numbers were off. Is this the guy, or is it the guy just that this being was trying to emulate? Because the other question is, if he wrote that book, where is that book? Was it published, or was it just one copy that was written? And because the other thing that it indicates, I can't remember in which part of Vertical Plane it is, but there's a point at which 2109 says he did write the book, and he died shortly thereafter, and he hid the book somewhere where it could be found. So I don't think it was published. I think there's one copy of it. He squirreled it away somewhere. Nobody's found it. But as we said before, is it even in our timeline? Do you believe any of this at all? But wouldn't it be amazing to find this 430 or 40-year-old book that tells this story from that perspective and has a picture of a Jaguar in it, the car?
If the book is anywhere, it's inside that cottage. And if someone wants to take it upon themselves to dig through the walls and the chimney and the stonework of that cottage, if it's going to be found anywhere, that's where it's going to be found.
Rich, I regret to inform you that Grosvenor, when he kicked Tomas off the property, he burned the cottage to the ground.
So you're saying there's no single structural element of that cottage left?
The foundation is probably there, parts of the foundation.
Then that's where you find the book. Good night, everybody.
Scott, you know where you find it. It's he was a man of God, right? He knew his holy book. It's under a threshing floor.
Well, yeah. Well, we should go find it if there is one. Here's what I'm going to do. There was a poem here that I'm going to close out this series with. Gentlemen, it's been great fun. Rich, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Rich. Yeah, we loved having you on.
Hey, guys, there's nothing I love more than giving you books that are worth hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, and then having you rip them apart like monkeys and write all over them and devalue them and profane them. It really warms my heart. And once again, thank you so much for letting me be a part of this discussion.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming on. So I'm going to read this paragraph, and then we're going to go out on this strange bit of poetry that they found not on the computer, but in their home. Although the cottage was fairly quiet throughout that November, with the computer packed away in its box in a corner, poltergeist activity would still occasionally occur. A simple stacking, usually, or objects relocated a few inches, sometimes more. The only event of significance I record here is the chalking on the pillar in the kitchen on Thursday, the 14th of November. Just 12 days after your birthday, Rich. It occurred sometime during the night and was gone without trace on the 15th of November. I reproduce it as received. Although it only existed briefly, we were quite geared up by now to making a note of things as soon as they were seen. The eyes are open, yet nothing do you see. The gray retarding mass is your convict. Quietly, alone, he sits in the dark, waiting for sentence to be passed, and demanding through the eyes of the blind, of unspoken questions to answers of ethereal kind. The soul, he is the traveler. Chain nor bar can hold him to frail flesh. Here is the ruler of time and space. Here is your God. That's going to wrap up our series on the vertical plane. Another very special thanks to our returning guest and great friend, screen and television writer and producer, Richard Hatem. We'll be back next week with a new show as part of Astonishing October.
Let's get
SPOOKY.
Astonishing Legends is edited by Sarah Voorhees Wendell and Brandon Schexnader. The show is co-produced by Tess Feifel, who is also our head of research.
Our theme, which is available as a ringtone, was composed by Judson Crane, and our sound design and additional composing is by Ryan McCullough.
Special thanks to the Astonishing Research Corps.
But most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Visit our store at astonishinglegends.com or interact with us and other listeners on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
You can also support the show at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, where patrons have access to additional bonus content. No part of this show may be reproduced anywhere without permission. Copyright Astonishing Legends Productions.
Good night.